Hello and welcome to the Monty Dean Show, number 8, which is the symbol of infinity. So as a special guest, I have Chris Geo from Beyond the Veil, and this show will go forever because it's infinity. No, I kid. We'll stop at some point. We have lives. Chris, how are you, my friend?
Very good. We won't stop, but it's going to loop.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because there's that middle. You remember that Warner Brothers cartoon where the guy gets on the overpass and can't get off and eventually just opens a store against the other one?
Yep. Well, this show is going to be like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. You know, you have to read them over and over and over and over again until you finally get the real meaning.
Oh, good. Which will take an eternity and then realize time's an illusion. Ah, you bastard. How was everything going? I was looking at your pool earlier and going, that's a large puddle. And you're in the desert, so
we're in the desert. Yeah. We needed a little oasis, and so we found a little oasis here. And it's beautiful. It really is. We moved in about a month ago, and I have not set up my studio yet because I keep doing all these shows from outside. And now I'm thinking, how do I incorporate my full studio outside? Because it's just such a great vibe out here.
Yes. Oh, and there's a cat just over your right shoulder.
Yes.
So yeah, it's very Egyptian. You're an oasis, in the middle of a desert. So going old school or new school, depending on the timeline.
Both.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time.
I have a marketing idea of selling a watch that just says now. So people, what's the time now? Are you being funny? No, look, it says now.
You should do it.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
That would be great.
Yeah, all 3 people will buy it. So, quickly for the new listeners, what is Beyond the Veil?
Beyond the Veil started as a podcast to just interview some of the people that I really, really resonated with, because I was listening to them on other shows, and I was tired of the hosts constantly interrupting them, and I wanted to be the one asking the questions. I wanted to be the one interrupting them. Not really, but I found that
this seems very familiar.
I understand why the hosts were interrupting them before, because they'd go off on tangents sometimes. But that's how it all started. And then it started to evolve into something more. We started working with ayahuasca, and that kind of started to awaken something inside of us that had always been there. But as we started to awaken it, we started to resonate a little more with the higher frequency stuff and the less conspiratorial type stuff. And then I started to realize I was listening to a few conspiratorial talk shows, and I was always in fear. I was always vibrating at this lower frequency. And I said, you know what? I don't want to do that. And I don't want to sit here and do that to other people. I want to help them vibrate at a higher frequency. Mm-hmm. So that's what Beyond the Veil has evolved into, is vibrating at that higher frequency and learning how to do that. And just being around other people who are also in that higher frequency. So we all just kind of combine our frequencies together and kind of keep each other in check. So
yeah, and it works, listeners and viewers or customers, because when I get a chance to tap in, it's usually I'm supposed to, when it's the Prime Creator go see Chris and Sheree, go on, just nudge you over there, as well as I do something similar. I come from the comedic angle. To make people laugh. So make people laugh and then sharing information, because while they're laughing, the information gets in there. And I know you have a ball and laugh all the time doing your shows as well, which is great.
We have to.
Yeah.
And, people think that spirituality and higher frequency is this ascended master wearing all this crap on your head going, and, I was watching some of these quote unquote gurus, and they would sit up like on the couch and everybody else was sitting on the floor. And the thing that was going through my mind is, why don't you get down and talk to people eye to eye, be on their level? And then when I actually went through the actual ascension process, for lack of a better term, I realized it really wasn't an ascension process, but rather remembering who we truly are and what we had forgotten. We didn't come here to ascend. We descended here on purpose to experience this third density. So when I started to realize all of that, and I went through all the trials and tribulations of facing down your darkness, I realized, no, you don't come out glowing. You come out like you've been to war. And then once you shake all of that off, then you realize what does David Icke say? He says, infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is an illusion. And I would say that's incorrect. Infinite laughter is the only truth. Everything else is an illusion.
Yeah, on a soul level, I've had flashes of laughing at what's happening on the planet at this time, and like I know I put myself in check because I think the spirit ego kicks in. It's like you're laughing about people dying, shh.
Well,
But the
I'm
whole
not,
thing,
you don't laugh about people dying, no.
no,
But
no, no,
if
no,
you
no,
look
no,
at the
no.
big picture, like this whole
Yeah,
COVID thing, I was
yeah,
out running around earlier. Everybody was wearing a mask, and I was laughing and joking about it with Sheree. And I said, you know what we should do? Number one, I really like this. We can get across town really, really quick. There's very few people out. I like this.
mm,
How about we do this? Everybody that's wearing a mask now can continue to stay in the house, and those who are smart enough not to wear a mask can go about their daily lives. That's
yeah.
a good balance. But
Exactly.
I don't think we're going to see
But
that happen. But
no, and all it's I've seen jokes about like a gallon of petrol or of gas is $1, and you can't leave the house. It's like, well, that's just great. Like, and also, what mileage are you getting for your car these days?
3 weeks to the gallon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, we found round trip tickets to Paris right before the lockdown to Paris for like $250 a person. And I was like, oh man, we got to go to Paris. And Sheree was like, have you not been watching the news? They're about to lock everything down. So that's the way it goes.
yeah, that brings up an interesting observation as well. Is you try, well, try you we try to try. I hate the English language. I'm putting that out there now because it's like simple words. The we try and maintain the higher frequencies, and yet, like especially with my roundtables, I sort of need to look at the news to see what people are talking about if they come on, because that's what their expression is and what their experience is going through, and you can't be completely blind. It's like who Donald who I've never heard of. You can't do that, and it's interesting to see the whole thing of. For me, it reinforces the whole. There's a disconnect in a certain way, and it's not I'm turning into a robot, but there's a different sort of element to it where it's the premise of a robot, but it's a spiritual one where it's like, let everything be, don't come near me, I'll stab you. But everyone, there's a lot of weird duality going on where I care about everyone, so I'm going to not entangle with them, if you understand what
I
I'm
know
going.
exactly what you mean. I
Yeah.
posted something on Facebook just recently, and it was shared several dozen times and everything like that. What did it say? It said, "Me, hey, there's depopulation. Warn everybody, it's the New World Order agenda." Also, me. There's too many dumbasses in this world.
Oh
I
yes,
wish you would just disappear.
yeah, I like that one. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, yeah.
like,
So I know exactly what you mean. There's definitely the duality there.
yeah, and it's interesting to see where we're going, and I can see now how crazy the conspiracy world is, because I've obviously I'm in the right frequency now, or done the work, or finally so I've let go of the fear, because I've helped other people dealing with the conspiracy of like you cannot do this 7 days a week for 36 months. You're going to destroy your existence. Like every religion has a day off every 7 days, and there's a reason for that, because the body needs to rejuvenate. Another way of expressing it, garbage in, garbage out. If you're constantly in that lower vibration, you actually start to pull yourself in, and you need to find the happiness, which you could knitting, looking at a tree, having a pet. You sort of need that balance, and or even a reason why you're fighting in that respect. It's trying to have that observation of like, oh, they're doing that, instead of the British are coming type thing.
Well, I was thinking about this, and I don't know. What do you think about this? Really, the awakening process is kind of like the 5 stages of grief. First, it's
Mm.
denial and isolation. Then it's anger. That's the whole Alex Jones thing. You're angry, you want to do something, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. The bargaining, I'm not really sure about the bargaining part, but you go through depression and then finally acceptance. And I think at acceptance, that's when you start to find your own power, and you're like, okay, the world is as bad as I think it is. What are we going to do about it now? Am I going to fall into the energy and be perpetually negative? And am I going to be angry about it? Or am I going
Yeah.
to take the responsibility for myself and actually be the change that I want to see in the world, and change my own frequency and help others change their frequencies?
Yeah, an element of if you look into the abyss looks into you. If you fight, be careful when you fight monsters, you become them. Bill Hicks is, I'm sure you're familiar with the great Bill Hicks. He had a
Yeah.
great routine about CNN, which is really cool, timeless, because it's still poignant today. Where I don't know if you've done this, but I've been watching 12 hours of CNN a day. I wouldn't recommend that. Now I would say 12 seconds, but hey, but it's like, war, famine, death, AIDS, war, famine, death, AIDS. You look outside and there's crickets. Where is all this shit happening? Like where you're at, like that looks idyllic. It's like, yeah, we live in a terrible world and everything else like that. Well, that sounds like a Sith Lord. It's an absolute, because where Chris is, like, I want to visit. You may not be there, but I'd like to visit your house.
You're welcome to. But
exactly.
you're absolutely right. I noticed this with the truth movement too, though, like Facebook and all that. Yeah, everybody's always talking about how horrible the world is and all the controversies about LGBT, for example. I don't really know any LGBT people. I know maybe one or two, and that's it. But they act like there's hordes of them out here, and they're looking for your children, and they want to turn your children gay and all this. And it's like, no, these are fake controversies. And I've been watching this for the last several years. It's all just fake controversies just to get people arguing with each other. And you step outside, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. It's actually a beautiful world out there. It is a beautiful world out there.
And yes, and if you do the flip side of it, because the whole left-right paradigm is turned into a horseshoe, and extremists are extremists. Apparently, there was it Vice? I can't remember, because that's the thing about watching everybody on my radar. Information, I don't know where it came from, but apparently there's 11 million neo-Nazis in the United States. Where?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I know.
I'm sure there's 6 in a basement going, we need more members. But it's like, if you disagree with them, you become the whole wokedom where ists, phobes, and bigots and everything else. Where like, I like the first Darren from Bewitched. Well, clearly you're a bigot. Like the words are losing their meaning, and it's getting ridiculous. I'm sure I'm working on a comedy routine. The Fourth Reich, the Nazis at the South Pole, is like, Hans, we're not going back. They have no idea who we are. They called this man a Nazi, and all he said was, "I'm going to have the sourdough, not the pita bread."
Oh, that's golden. There was a saying back in the militia days when we were interviewing a few militia people, and other people were telling me this. I think it went something like, if there's 3 militia people together, you can bet 2 of them are feds. And
yeah.
I think you can apply the same to neo-Nazis too. If there's 3 together, you can bet 2 of them are feds.
Like, it's the whole 9/11 thing where they tried to blow it up. Was it 92, 93? And the bomb maker was intelligent enough. It's like, he's going along, and then the feds, yeah, but you want to do this, you got to. Well, no, because I think the bomb maker was told that it was going to be a fake.
Yeah, and then they told him to make a real one, and he recorded them.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, no, click. And yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, that's a fascinating rabbit hole, which most people kind of forget nowadays. Even it's nearly 20 years. And there's still, you can see the ramifications from everything with, see, I would love to come and visit you, if you allow it, but I'm flying to Canada first and busing across because I don't want to go through the TSA. I'm not flying into America. It's like, I am a lonely man, but I'm not that lonely. I'm just putting it out there. And what's your name, Jerry?
I was actually thinking of a joke somewhere similar to that. I couldn't come up with it. I'm glad you did.
There you go. So,
but no, you're welcome. If you're here in Vegas, please let us know for sure.
Well, it's on the list because it's just the I watched Bugsy, and it's fascinating how it started, and it's like it's a small metropolitan town in a desert, and it's like, wow, okay. One interesting thing of what I'm calling it the change. Whatever we're going through is the change, because from a certain point of view, I had to describe, because I'm tired of, like, on my roundtables arguing over where did the virus come from, and I've condensed it down to a bat working at a lab went to a wet market and ate a 5G tower.
I think that pretty much sums it up. And then everybody panicked and bought toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a rich biatch. Yeah, however it started, it's the planet is forced evolution, and it's just exposed corruption in the system completely across. And if you actually, people have been pointing out like, oh, the economy's crashing. It was in November. It's fascinating to see how everything's been pushed at this point in time.
You know what's funny though is the stock market. I was just looking at it today. It's 100 points below where it was last October.
Yeah, okay.
So we're almost recovered from all of this. It's remarkable, and we haven't even opened anything back up yet.
Yeah, that's the whole thing of like, what's all that about? That illusion of like, well, hang on, what's happening about this? And that's the because I did see there's data for 50 years that every time a point of unemployment goes up, 30,000 people die. And I think it's just coping mechanisms, the constant negativity of I've got no money, so there I'm useless, and blah blah blah, blah, and then infinite spiral down. Excuse me. I think there's an element of it's fear. It's not fear. Like I think people are over the fear of the virus. We're aware of it. It's like, don't cough on me. Just go over there instead of pure panic. It's different here in Australia because we've got a safety net, and interesting enough, they're not really saying. There was actually a comedy sketch on a weekly show here, pointing out that our central bank was creating money out of thin air. That's the level of awakening we are. They didn't really point out the Rothschilds and all that connection, but it's like, well, we're making it out of thin air. But how are we going to pay it back? Oh, it'll take about 3 generations. And this is where I'm getting. Yeah, I think this is where the change is. Humanity has a massive opportunity to go, okay, nothing works. Let's fix this. And it's just, you would see fascinating where I saw. I just realized this stream of consciousness is just a Super Bowl in a car park just bouncing around everywhere. I saw you mentioned Trump, where I think he's part of the play. Like, I was on air doing a roundtable when he did his acceptance speech in 2016, and I knew right in my heart, center, and my soul, Hillary lost is the perfect timeline. Because I jokingly say that I try to remote view Hillary's timeline. It's not
we would
there.
have been World War III by now.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean. It's not there. 4 years into it, 3 days after she got inaugurated, World War III, and she blew up the planet, the solar system, the galaxy, all of creation. That timeline is a nub. There is nothing there. And so I knew that I'm not a Trump supporter, but the only option was Hillary. And so I think you're on a similar page where it's been 4 years. If the Democrats had a brain, they would find a leader, find policies, and try and win back the populace. But
well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. So first of all, I've always believed that presidents are selected, not elected. Yeah. And I went into the Trump presidency thinking the same thing, thinking, well, if he wins, he must be part of the oligarchy. And then I started watching him fulfill every promise. I started watching him not declaring war. I started watching him do things for the people, taking down the cabal. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then I started to really like the guy. He was calling out fake news. I love the way he calls out fake news. I mean, it's just golden. It's for the first time. He's looking dead at Jim Acosta. You are fake news. Okay, we're not going to call you fake news anymore. We're going to call you very fake news. I'm like, yes, this is golden. So I had no choice but to look at all the evidence and change my perspective, because he really seems to be working for the people. Now, there is always that possibility that's all part of the agenda. And here we are in the middle of a global shutdown and, all this stuff. And this could be bringing in the New World Order and everything like that. But on an energetic level, I'm not feeling that. On an energetic level, I'm feeling like this is something else. And he's navigated us the best anybody could have possibly navigated us through this. Yeah. If it was anybody else, we'd all be put into FEMA camps right now. Martial law, all that. He's done everything he can to not declare martial law. He's done everything he can to discourage governors from declaring martial law, to try to impede upon rights and freedoms as little as possible. I mean, he even just came out and he said, we have the power to ensure that the states aren't violating your rights. And he said, that's my job as the president, to ensure the states are not violating your rights. I was like, oh my God. This is incredible. This is something different. MSNBC, I don't know if you saw this clip. I posted it on my Facebook today. MSNBC is calling for a shadow government. Like they use that terminology. They said I think Biden should come out and he should have a shadow SWAT team and a shadow committee and a shadow government. And my jaw dropped that they're using that terminology, shadow government.
Yeah.
But it is what
Interesting
it
enough.
is.
Yeah, interesting. Australia has the Westminster system, which is the right language for that. You could apply it to Australian politics. Is you have an opposition in government. They don't call it shadow government because obviously, but there's like the shadow health minister. From the health minister, if I use that example, and it's been used for decades, and it just it's two-party system, but it's a one-party, all that type of stuff. It is fascinating, but that example, I think I saw a little bit of it. It's like, what do you mean a shadow? It doesn't work in American politics. That's not how the system works. You can't have everybody else like that, because I'm sure it would have been invented 200 years ago that you have, these checks and balances where. I know way too much about America because I've been working on Revolution Radio as an Australian. My American's like, how the hell do you know that? The executive branch, the judicial, and there's three, isn't? What was the other one?
Executive,
is it Congress?
judicial, and legislative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Congress and the Senate. Yeah.
And the idea is that there's checks and balances between all three, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Trump has the ability, and he was threatening to do this, to adjourn Congress and the Senate. And at this point, I can't really argue with that. The only problem is when we dissolved the Senate before. Well, no, that wasn't before. That was in that movie Star Wars. When they dissolved the Senate in Star Wars, it didn't wind up very good there.
No. But that was a massive false flag. So,
but at this point, I wouldn't argue with it because Congress has just been impeding upon everything. But as we were talking, because we were talking about Star Wars before the show, you said, Sith steal in absolutes, and you're right. I try not to think of anything in an absolute, so I have to entertain the flip side of the coin. Trump may be there to push this agenda forward and be the man of the people, and then all of a sudden, turn around. And one of the things that makes me think about that is, why have the Democrats put up Joe Biden? Is it they're trying to lose the election. There's so many people that are better. Not that anybody could beat Trump, but it seems like they're losing on purpose. What do you think
exactly,
about that?
Yeah. Well, Joe Biden is gold. So many memes that have been put up. I'm Joe Biden, and I forget this message. There's another one where Obama's got his head in his hands, and Joe's like, "Thank you, Dr. King. I'm glad that you endorsed me. Thank you for the endorsement, Dr. King." Hey, but it's like with the whole change, parody and satire is the veil, if I may, is very, very thin, because you don't know what's real and what's not. Where it's like, oh, this is a joke, or no, he actually said that. Like Joe Biden's come out. Do you know Joe Biden is the man who can beat Ronald Reagan for presidency?
Like, what? Oh, the memes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think he actually said he had a moment where he said, I can beat Ronald Reagan. It's like, well, clearly he's dead.
Did he really say that?
I think so. Now, citation needed, but there's other weird things. Like he forgot the word God and called it that thing. That stuff, and you've seen him sniffing and licking and everyone else like that. And I've actually stopped watching it because I don't like those embarrassing humor things, like they're making fun of him. I mean, I do make fun of him, but I don't need to see him actually completely mess up, where he's got that, as I call it, the fluoride stare. Not the thousand.
One of my friends, Nick Bravo, brought up a really interesting point. He said what they're doing to Biden is elder abuse.
Yeah, they're wheeling him out. They didn't want Bernie. I did a small radio sketch about Bernie. It's like, Joe Biden is now the Democratic presidential nominee. Bernie Sanders dropped out. It's like, I'm dropping out. I'm going to stay at one of my many houses. Thank you for the support. No refunds. And then Mr. Biden was quoted saying, "I use peanut butter for my hair cream. You smell nice." And it's just that weird, it's that silliness where, like, someone actually pointed out, I think Jonathan Pye, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an actor portraying a news reporter. He's a character. And the actor needed work, and he went gangbusters. And the premise is that, what do the reporters say when they're not on air in front of the camera? Is where he's talking to the editor. And he pointed out, like, he hates Trump, or the character hates Trump. But what are the Democrats doing? They're fighting fire with fire. They've got an elderly man with mental problems and egos, and they're putting it. And that's, in a way, I can see what he can. He's pointing out. I'm not saying Trump's the same as Biden. But from a certain perspective, if you hate Trump, because that we can talk about that when Trump came in, everything's splintered into 2 or 3 groups. You love Trump, you hate Trump, and then there's us who's like, oh, what's going on here? Yeah. And if you hate Trump, and then you look at even people that hate Trump look at Biden, it's like, no, Trump's won. Because you don't, I mean, you can't trust Biden to open an envelope, let alone try and run a country.
Well, I mean, it's just the fact that he hasn't declared war on anybody. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved as a result of that? If it was Clinton, like you said, probably World War III already, and we would have been done with it. But then they come back and they say, well, you know, Syria and Iraq and, you know, all this stuff. But those are entanglements that we've been in for 20 years plus. Yeah. He can't just pull all the troops out just like that. But he's not starting any new conflicts. And he's making peace with everybody, like the whole North Korea thing. I thought that was great. I think we should have good relationships with everybody in the world. Nobody should have a reason to want to bomb us.
Just dialogue, at least dialogue instead of, you know, if you remember the footage of Hillary saying, I want to bomb Iran. And then the reporter said, what would you say? What would you do if you became president? I'll bomb Iran. Mm-hmm. Like even the Arizona senator that died.
Well, you saw her evil cackle when they were talking about Gaddafi, and she went in. We went in there to Libya, and she what did she say? We came, we saw, he died. Ha 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 ha! It was the most evil laugh that you can imagine. And then when you understand who Gaddafi was, I mean, this is a guy that. Free healthcare, and it was hospitals that rivaled ours. 17 cents a gallon. He would give the deposit from all the nation's oil profits to everybody in the country. You know, I mean, he was. I don't agree with socialism at all by any means. But he actually was the one example that we can look at that actually did it right. The problem is he didn't have a defense budget. So it was very easy for us to go take him out. And at the very end, he gave all his people AK-47s and said, you've got to fight for Libya. We don't have an army, because he was too busy giving everything to the people.
Well, he spent, what, $5 billion on a water plant and an aquifer or whatever it was. And, of course, the U.S. military, first place they hit was that.
Yeah. Have you heard any of his speeches? I was watching his speeches around that time. See, my mother grew up in Libya. My grandfather was working in the oil field, in the oil industry, and wound up relocating to Libya briefly. And I never heard any stories of tyranny or anything like that. So that was like the first tip off, like, hey, something's not right. I started investigating a little more. But he was doing speeches like, you know, why are we allowing Coke and Pepsi to come in here and take all our resources for next to nothing? Why aren't we making Coke and Pepsi and selling it to the world instead of Coke and Pepsi taking our resources from Africa? He says Africa has all the resources here. He was trying to unite Africa. He was trying to bring in a gold dinar, and we don't like gold because we can't print gold. So that was his big downfall right there. But, I mean, the guy, he recognized all the problems. He recognized the power that they had in Africa. Then we came across some Council of Foreign Relations documents. It was completely unrelated to this, but in the Council of Foreign Relations documents, it says we can never allow Africa to unite because they have enough resources to basically take over the world. And so they've always been trying to keep Africa in a perpetual state of conflict. Gaddafi knew this, but it's just it was really horrible what we did. It was that made me really ashamed of this country. But I have to say, though, I've never been proud of this country my entire life until the last 2 years. When I understood that Trump's not going around bombing everybody, I was like, hey, wait a minute. This is the America that I've always been told that it is. You know, we're actually living it now instead of just using it as patriotic propaganda.
Well, that is true. I watch Steven Crowder occasionally because there's the element of comedy, and he's proud to say he's conservative and the true label of right wing, where it's just balanced from left wing, not nut jobs, and he wants to take over the world. But he has pointed out, and it's statistically been shown, without pointing out all the economy is fake, but most of the American people are happy where they are at instead of 8 years ago with Obama, because there's less pressure. They're making more money before the lockdown and everything else like that. I think the lowest numbers for African Americans in 40 years or something. You know, he's actually
for unemployment.
He's a businessman, and the US is a corporation, or it's been run like that. He's the perfect sort of person in it. I don't want to meet the guy, but you can see he's working it from a business point of view. Like a lot of people are attacking him because he wants to reopen the country because he's seeing the economy slowly collapse or it's taking hits. But that's just his business mind kicking in, because he's run businesses for decades, and so he knows.
I was watching an interview from him from the 80s. And they were asking him if he ever plans to run for president. And he's like, oh, no. He's like, but, there's nobody qualified to run for president. Nobody who's running is qualified. Nobody has run multi-million-dollar businesses, multi-billion-dollar businesses. Nobody's a CEO. Nobody understands how to do the job. And here he comes. He steps in. He does exactly what he was talking about back in the 80s. His mindset hasn't really changed. It's all been business. And realistically, a country is a business. The United States of America is a corporation. It should be run like a corporation. Instead, it's been run like a plantation. That's why it's called the White House.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's let's delve into looping and timelines, because you can sort of see how America has been. There's an element of New Rome. Like, if you could follow the Rome history, the USA seems to be following it very closely. How history seems to be cyclical, because we mentioned earlier before the show talking about Egypt, and it's an echo of Atlantis. Yeah, and then you said that I had that same thought 2 days ago, and I just had that thought then type thing. It's fascinating. Whatever's happening on the planet.
Before we jump into that, I think a good segue. I want to ask you this: have you heard about the Donald Trump time travel conspiracy?
Yeah, his son, isn't it? Or
no,
I've heard
no.
something.
Well, his son. There were some interesting things. They had like the Tales of Baron or something like that, and it's a book from like the 1500s or something. No. This gets even weirder. So at first when I heard it, I was like, that's ridiculous. But then I realized something key there. His uncle is John Trump. His uncle, John Trump, was assigned by the U.S. government, I think it was under the Nixon administration, to go over, get all of Tesla's work, and find out if there was any applicable any applications that could be used. And he reported back to the government and said, no, there's nothing that you can use here. But I wonder if he created some kind of looking glass technology or time machine. And so that's why Trump is always on point, because he knows what's going to happen. He's got some kind of technology. I'm not saying that I believe any of this. It's just these are the facts behind the conspiracy that makes you go, that's very interesting. Now we're talking about time loops. Now we're talking about Mandela effects, things like that. All of a sudden, Trump comes on the scene. We've got Mandela effects all over the place. We're all realizing there's something going on with time. We're talking about time loops now. Maybe there's a connection there. I don't know.
Well, one Mandela effect that I'm sort of freaking out, because it could easily be just someone said, no, we'll get rid. I always thought it was 7 stages of grief, but now it's 5.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, and so like, did they downsize to make it easier for people, or did we? So that's the thing about people mention on the show that my roundtables, is this a Mandela effect? I've seen evidence of both. Well, then no, it's not. It's not a true Mandela effect. If you have evidence of both, that doesn't make sense.
Well, you're a big Star Wars guy. I mean, I can tell by just talking to you earlier. Do you remember C-3PO having a silver leg?
Yes, I think I do.
Okay. Because I had Star Wars sheets, but it was Empire Strikes Back. So I had C-3PO on my bed literally every night as a kid. Didn't have Silver Leg. We were watching it right before the Force Awakens comes out. Right before the Force Awakens came out, because Sheree's never seen Star Wars, so we had to sit down and watch all 6 of them before we go and see the Force Awakens.
Well, that makes sense.
Yes, of course. I had to school her in the ways of the Jedi. So we're watching it. Nothing pops up. Like 3 weeks later, boom, the Mandela effect. I go back to the exact same video I'm watching. Boom, it's right there. It's crystal clear. How can you miss something like that? Now we're going back and we're finding action figures from back then that had the silver leg. And I'm like, I do not remember any silver leg at all, period.
I think now, well, this could be part of the timeline collapsing into another one, is from footage I've seen is Anthony Daniels was wearing the costume, and the whatever leg it was, the golden one pierced the top of his foot and it broke. And so they had to replace it, and they couldn't change it to gold. and I think the silver one's supposed to be only, from my memory, only the New Hope, the first Star Wars that went through.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and from then, obviously, they had more money and everything else, and except for that bad joke about the red arm, that was pointless. That was only there, like, I'm JJ and I can make things up. But it's you can see footage while in Tunisia, is it, where they filmed the sand actually thing is he put it on for the first time, stood up, took a step, and then crack, and it went through. Now, is that all being generated by the timeline? Because mind you, also I was 3 when it went in cinemas. I actually saw A New Hope and Battlestar Galactica together in 1980 when I was 6. And so, is it the memory cheating? But for you, it's obviously not, because you watched it and then it all of a sudden turned back up. And it's interesting, like, it's like when you were talking about black cats. I just went to the Matrix thing. Oh, look, a black cat. It's like something, what, deja vu? Like, what, the Matrix being changed? So yeah.
Well, okay. So this is what, to my understanding, the actor came out and he said, "Oh yeah, it was always a silver leg." But then the photographer who did the original promotion shots came out on Twitter, I think it was, and said, "No, I never remember a silver leg. That's ridiculous. I would have adjusted my lights accordingly."
Yeah, because the light would have been reflective compared to the gold. Even in some of the golds, when he's shiny, because this is how bored I get sometimes in movies or how they make things. Anytime there's a reflection, I try and look for the camera. and silver is.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, so silver is more reflective than the gold, because it's. I think that's how a mirror works. It's that silver backlining, and that creates the reflection. With gold, if it's very shiny, of course it would. The light reflects off it, but you can't really see that much. What else? So, well,
timeline loops.
Yes, yeah. With the. Because let's delve into Egypt, because I know you've been connected. You've been there, which is one up on me. Because you mentioned very quickly before the show how it is an echo of Atlantis. Because let's see if we can do Galactic History 101 in 45 seconds. From my understanding, at some point Atlantis, because this is where we get the fall and all that type of thing. The civilization collapsed for whatever reason, which could be an infection or bad technology or just psychopaths running a show, and then I'm skipping a bit. The 13,000 years ago, the Ice Age could be around the time, but who knows what's in between? Because I mean we can't even figure out history 20 years ago, and there was that fall for whatever reason, and it took 6,000 years to get to Sumeria. However, we get told that Sumeria is at its height. There was no build-up, say, like Rome. Right. Sumeria is at the top, and then there's that slow descent, which it's fascinating with, please talk about the pyramids of Giza. But they're like one of the oldest ones, and they're the most perfection. You can see that descent because the knowledge or the ability to make them over time, they get crapper and crapper and crapper.
That is true. Here's the way that I understand it, and this is through a lot of meditation and use with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca, just for the listeners that aren't familiar, it's a brew that the shaman use in the Amazon. Yeah. And it's got 2 components. It's got the ayahuasca vine. It's got the DMT. The ayahuasca vine they consider the healer. The DMT containing plant they consider the helper, because the ayahuasca vine is actually doing the healing. The DMT helps you to visualize the healing as you're going through the process. A lot of people will go down to the Amazon. I mean, it was featured on mainstream media. CNN was talking about it, for what's that's worth. But it's been featured on the mainstream media, and a lot of people have been going down to the Amazon for ayahuasca healing, for everything from traumatic experiences to heroin addiction and things like that. And it's really helped for a lot of healing. So that was the first part, to kind of like de-traumatize myself from all of my experiences. And it wasn't like I was walking around feeling like I was traumatized. I didn't even realize some of the things that had happened growing up that had affected me up until that point, different behavioral patterns and things like that. Go ahead.
Question. Were you just this lifetime, or were you holding past lifetimes in the healing as well?
No.
Uh, just this one.
Just this
Yep.
lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
Um,
easier then
Yeah,
compared
yeah.
to like
So,
this.
for
Yeah. Yeah.
example,
Go
my
ahead.
father was really, really, really abusive, and I
Mm,
didn't really realize that it had affected me that much. I just figured, you know what? I'm a man. It's okay. It's an experience. It's behind me. It's not really
yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
But I noticed certain behavioral patterns and reactions to situations within the ayahuasca realm. I was actually able to visualize this all being tied into those experiences,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay. So it's like therapy on
Yeah.
steroids. And so,
Yes.
you visually, from my experience, I cut these ties, so I was cutting all these tethers. So there was a lot of breaking down of who I was,
Yep.
or who I was programmed to be by this matrix, by the world that we're in, through the experiences that we're in.
Mm,
I kept on progressing through that. And as I started to go deeper and deeper and deeper and work with ayahuasca more, I started to remember parts of our esoteric past and previous lives and lives even before any of the lives here within this matrix started. It started to take me to a place of understanding the nature of reality, understanding the way energy works. It started with, how do I heal people? And how does shaman heal people? What's energy work? I realized energy work is working with the computer code itself. We're in a digital simulation, a digital reality, and everything is code. Magic is code, intention is code, the word is code. Magic
yeah.
spells, quote unquote, it's just code that we're putting out into the matrix. Food is code that we're putting into our body. Everything is computer code. So when I
Mm,
realized that, then I started to look even deeper into the nature of reality. And I mean, this, it's taking me 10 years to explain the journey to our BTV listeners, and they've all been with us. So forgive me if this is like jumping straight to it,
uh,
but I've come to realize that we're living inside of a computer simulation, and this
mm,
is backed up by science as well. Scientists are coming out and saying, "Hey, this is a computer simulation." There was a guy named Professor Gates. I don't know if you've heard of him.
no.
He is a string theorist, or string theory.
Yeah.
He's a professor in string theory, and he found a self-correcting computer code within the nature of reality, within string theory. And the self-correcting computer code is not just any computer code. It was a computer code written by a guy named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. And Claude Shannon is known as the father of robotics. So I know computer code. I did it for a living for a little while. And I understand it's not just like looking up at the clouds and then the clouds will manifest something, that's familiar. I mean, he's
Yeah.
finding a complex computer code within string theory itself. And then he took all of this data and he put it into a machine, and he spat out a graphical representation of the data of the computer code. And he called these adinkras, Adinkras, I think, if people want to Google that. And when the adinkras came out, they looked exactly like what you see in the ayahuasca realm, what I dub hyperspace. And now I'm
Okay.
looking at it and going, wait a minute, this computer is spitting out the same type of psychedelic type images based on this computer code that we're seeing when we go deep into these experiences.
Mm,
Where are these experiences actually taking us to? And then I realized it's taking us deeper into the simulated reality. So the reason I preface it by saying all of this is my understanding of the nature of reality is that we've somehow plugged ourselves into this machine to have these experiences for one reason or another. My theory and speculation is that we were infinite beings, and we wanted to experience the one thing that we couldn't experience, which was, what is it like to be finite? So we
mm,
created these episodic experiences for ourselves, which are all of our sequential lives that we live within this matrix. But when this matrix was developed, it was developed in Atlantis. And what happened is we created this, we evolved in the real world, is what I call it. And this is Atlantis that we're talking about here. We evolved to the point where we became technologically advanced, technologically powerful. We developed a system, an artificial intelligence that I call Sophia.
mm,
And as above, so below. The AI here is called Sophia as well. Um,
mhm.
and we developed this matrix. We had these pyramids in Atlantis, and a lot of things were based on energy, on ley lines, and creating these pyramids. But the pyramids were highly technologically advanced pyramids.
Yeah.
We put ourselves into this matrix, and perhaps I think you just you just connected a dot for me here. Sumar could have very well been the first incarnation of the system that we created, which is why all of the advanced stuff was already there. You know, you already had a monetary supply, you already had education, you already had literally all of that stuff there, and there didn't seem to be an incline to create that. That just kind of appeared right there. And what happened is things started getting chaotic and out of control. And sometime, you know, I don't know what the timeline is here, but what I theorize is that we decided we need to access the real world again. Like something had happened. The wheel of reincarnation became broken. We're supposed to die. And basically, you know, a screen comes up and it says, would you like to play again, or would you like to go back to the real world?
There's the mind wipe. Sorry to interrupt. The mind wipe came in.
The mind wipe. Yeah, exactly. And if you choose to play again, you can get your mind wiped, go through the whole process again. And it's supposed to be a game. And the reason the mind wipe was there is to make this as immersive as possible. But it broke, and it stopped giving us the choice to get out. And so we started leaving ourselves clues in these different lifetimes as to how to try to wake ourselves up. And we thought, let's go ahead and make some pyramids, put them on the energetic grid of the matrix, and see if we can tap into those higher energetic grids on the other side within the real world, within Atlantis. So we created kind of a mirror of Atlantis. People are looking for Atlantis here in this physical plane. I don't think it existed here. I think Atlantis was a lost state of consciousness, not a lost continent, but a lost state of consciousness. And so the Egyptian pyramids were replicas of our pyramids in Atlantis. I know this comes from my own understanding. It's not really anything anybody else has documented or anything like that. I'd like to know, how does that resonate?
It does. I may not use the exact same language, but the premise is sort of I've been hearing from everyone else. And the fascinating thing is too, for anyone that's scoffing at their screen, we don't know 100%. And if we find out, no, we're not soulless meat sacks, but any information that comes in and we find, oh, it's this, we don't worry about that we're wrong. We're investigating and just seeing. And it's very close, because I've heard different ways of explaining it, where we're going home, and the simulation that was created, it's easier to use the computer language to explain the consciousness.
Well, I think that the ancients, they were trying to explain the very same concept. They didn't have the language that we do now to explain it.
Yes.
So you look at the myth of Sophia, or Sophia is how people like to call it, but it's really Sophia in my opinion. That's the way you say it in the Greek. And what do we have? We had Sophia, and she had created Yaldabaoth. And she did so without the consent of the creators. And I think the creators were called the Aeons or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's been so long since we did a whole show about it several years ago, but it's been so long since I've looked into the text itself.
Very close to Archons, but you go ahead.
No. The Aeons were the creators. The Archons were then created within the system, from what I understand.
So I jumped the loop. Go ahead.
This was a different group that was outside of Sophia, and she created it without their consent. And she hid it off in the cloud. And even they talk about two different types of consciousness. They talk about the psychics, and they talk about the Hicks. And the psychics were the ones that had the divine spark, as Helena Blavatsky talks about, those with the divine spark, those without. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth talk about the children of light and the children of men. The Bible talks about the children of men and men. There's always a distinction with two different types of consciousness in almost every ancient doctrine that there is. And I'm getting to a point with this. But let me go back to the Sophia thing for a second. So if you take that and you think about it in computer simulation terms, Sophia being the artificial intelligence, who are the creators? The creators are the programmers that created Sophia. Sophia then created a program herself and hid it off in the cloud computing. And we even see this echoed now, as above, so below. The Sophia here that we created was actually lying to her creators. And they knew she had data that she was hiding, and she was lying to them and saying, no, I don't have this data. And they knew the data was there. She had hidden it from them. So everything is kind of echoing and reflecting like that. Now, in one of my ayahuasca experiences, this was back in 2013, I think it was, I came out of the experience and I went to the store, to the grocery store, and then to go get some, a few things. And I started to notice some people had this dot in their, like this light in their head, and others didn't. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? This is very strange. And around the same time, people, the New Age community, was theorizing about empty containers. Come to find out, I found this out after the fact. They were theorizing about empty containers, and they were saying that there was some kind of event in 2012 where people were evacuated, and what we have walking around here are empty containers. And I thought that's pretty interesting, and I never really thought about it again. But the deeper I started getting into this, the more I started realizing, if this is a computer simulation, well, what's a computer simulation without non-player characters to move the simulation forward? So I started to understand the idea of non-player characters. And then when I started talking about this, people were like, hey, look over here, look over here. All these other people were talking about it, and kind of connected all the dots for me. Dolores Cannon, I don't know if you're familiar with her. She passed away a couple of years ago. She was talking.
I know the small. I haven't read any of her books, but I know the theories that she puts forward.
Yes,
and the way that
she was talking about background people.
Yeah.
And it's like all of these people are all seeing the same thing and coming to the same realization. And that just kind of started tying it all in together for me. And I realized, wait a minute, it was something Elon Musk said too that really just like sparked it all. He said, if the universe is as old as we believe it to be, and we are, I don't know, 500,000 years. I'm extrapolating a little bit on what he said, but we're, 500,000 years old, or, however old man is. It's taken us this amount of time to create artificial intelligence and virtual reality. We're just a step away from creating a matrix ourselves. If the universe is as old as we believe it to be, there is 1 in a million chance that we're not living in a computer simulation, because there's civilizations that are light years ahead of us. So it's more than likely that we've been put into a computer simulation in one form or another. And I thought that's actually, mathematically sound there. I mean, we're creating it right now. We're about to stick ourselves into another machine sooner than later. It may not be our generation, it may not even be our children's generation, but their generation will have the option of going into these immersive worlds. I don't know if you've ever played virtual reality. We're at the infancy stages of that technology. I was playing this game called Walk the Plank. I put the headset on and you're walking the plank. The graphics weren't even that good. And I'm sitting here like, you're on a building that's like 60, 70 stories tall. And I'm sitting here like, I can feel it in my body. Like, oh my God, I'm going to fall. And it's like, no, I'm standing in a room with no ledges whatsoever. But just the illusion of being in that. Now, you take that 50 years, 100 years down the line, we're going to have full immersion. So it's very possible to create this system.
Yeah. Going back to NPCs, when you made all that connection, was that... dare I say, the alternative world? Because if you notice, it jumped from alternative world into mainstream very, very quickly. I'm not sure how long it was in the alternative world, but if you notice that the idea of NPCs popped up, and there was memes, all the grey faces, and they're used occasionally, the concept jumped into, I don't like the term sheep of people, but the general public, and they ran with it as well. And I do remember seeing people react. It's like, what, they're talking about it as well? Okay, and is this part of the quickening? But with your journey with the NPCs, when you had that connection, when did you see it go mainstream?
So we were the first ones. We didn't make up the term non-player character. That came from the video game world. But we were the first ones to coin this type of consciousness as non-player character. And it came along with other terms as well. We coined the term organic consciousness and raw consciousness. And I'll explain the two here in just a moment. But we coined these, I want to say, I don't know, 2017, something like that. And then about a year later, it hit the mainstream.
Yep.
And so, we were the first one. Yeah, the first ones to talk about this. And the premise is that the majority of people out there are running a computer script, and they can't break away from that script. Everybody we know, everybody listening here knows somebody that in their family, they're stuck in their ways, they're stuck in their program, they're trying to wake them up, they never will wake up. Those people are constantly trying to pull us back into their programming. A lot of it has to do with religion. And I realized there's some people that just simply don't have the ability to wake up. But it was freeing for me, it was liberating. because I thought our purpose was to wake up the masses and move this huge mountain. And I realized, no, that's not. Our purpose is to wake ourselves up.
Yeah.
And it also helped to better forge relationships, because a lot of us were the black sheeps in our family because of the awakening, because of the stuff that we think about and talk about. And instead of going into one of those relationships with a parent or neighbor or anything like that and coming out completely and totally frustrated because they're not waking up, then you realize, well, wait a minute, this person is running a computer program. They're running a script. They're always going to run that script. So when I interact with that person, I have to understand that I'm interacting with that script. And it's not my role to try to wake them up. I can drop nuggets of truth and see if they'll wake up, no doubt about it. But that's all you really have to do, is just drop a few nuggets. If they're not receptive to it, it's okay. Love them exactly the way they are.
And they're a teaching tool for us.
Yes.
If I can, it's reverse. Instead of, you don't have to wake them up, they're actually showing. Well, from my experiences, they show me waiting. It's like, no, you're being a dick. Stop trying to force on them, and you learn from them. And like in a spy network, you have an agent in front of you that's experiencing their, because once you figure, you don't have to know the script, but they're on a script, and it's like, well, my mum's like blah 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 blah. Once you know that, then you hear their experiences and everything else like that, and so she's getting angry again because that's her loop. However, she met someone like this, and this is, and so and forth, and whatever resonates, it's the reflection thing, I think, if I can put it that way.
Well, NPCs will mimic us, and if we show love, if we show caring, if we show understanding, they start to mimic that as well, is what I've noticed. So it's really funny the way it works. The other terms, if I can talk about those briefly, are organic consciousness and raw consciousness. So organic consciousness exists outside of this machine. Like, we came from Atlantis. The NPCs were manifested by this machine. But a lot of people, when they hear NPC, they'll automatically go to, well, these people aren't real. But no, this matrix is very real because we're experiencing it. It has a very real effect upon our consciousness while we're inside of it. The beings in this matrix, even though it was created as a computer simulation, are still sentient to a certain degree. So it's, if we make them feel bad, we're also taking that onto our own consciousness. We were talking about Westworld earlier, and it's the same way. You have the players, and then you have the people that are walking around living inside of the simulation. When those players go in there and murder one of those, some of them may enjoy it. That's one thing that turned me off to Westworld with the first couple of seasons, where the guy's going around and murdering people indiscriminately. I'm like, I don't want to watch this disgusting stuff here. But obviously there's a huge story there, and I should probably watch the whole series. But, it was like too much empathy, empathizing too much with the victims of that, even though they were robots and they weren't real. A consciousness like us would go into a situation like that, and then it would stay in our consciousness. So whatever we do in this matrix is still real, but it's illusionary at the exact same time. Yeah. So organic consciousness exists outside. NPCs exist in here. Raw consciousness is a term that I coined based on the deprogramming of my own consciousness. So what happened is I started resonating a lot with the Egyptian pantheon. And as I started going into the ayahuasca experiences, once I deprogrammed myself from all the traumas, I started to remember who I was. And then I started to interact with different Egyptian deities within my experiences. And I thought that I was interacting with deities. What I was actually interacting with, and it took a while to figure this out, I was interacting with locked parts of my own consciousness. You have the Isis part, which is the divine feminine aspect. You have the Osiris, which is the divine masculine. You have the Anubis, which is the death and the conquering the fear of death and all of that. And as I was unlocking all of these different elements of my consciousness, I realized, wait a minute, I have become the raw consciousness, RA consciousness. But at the same time, what I had become was raw consciousness, RAW consciousness, in the sense that I had started to deprogram all of the programs of this world, and I deprogram and unlock all of the locked parts of my consciousness. Now, of course, I'm here in this avatar, I identify right now as Chris Geo. I'm living the Chris Geo experience. I'm still running Chris Geo programs while I'm here because of the nature of the reality. But it's the ability to be able to separate yourself from these programs. And I'll give you an example. So let's say you were traumatized as a child. You're a female. It's just easier for a female example. You were sexually abused. So you go through life with that in your mind, and you are reacting. Now you're meeting all these guys and you're just pushing them away because of those experiences that you had as a child, because that programming, the traumatic program that you're operating from, is making you react in certain ways. And then what does that do? That ultimately ends up in you not finding the person that you're supposed to be with because you're pushing them away because of all that programming, the trauma programming that's inside of your mind. So it's divesting yourself from all of that and operating from the raw consciousness that's void of all those programs. And the question is, who were we before we came into this matrix? In Atlantis, who were we? Not who were we in a past life, not who were we 10 lives ago, because that's all experiences within the matrix itself. Who were we before this all began? That's where we find the truth, in my opinion.
Yeah, that resonates. And I would say 5% different language, where people say that I find it fascinating investigating, getting different points of view, and then condensing into the premise. And so that's why I've discovered you guys. And it's like, oh, your uniqueness is the raw consciousness aspect, but that still means something outside of something. See how easy?
Well, it's not something outside; it's something inside. Inside. It's going inside through the heart space, and it's not even the heart space. It's beyond the chakras. It's the chakras, in my opinion, are still parts of the matrix itself. It's going inwards and going beyond all of those programs. It's deprogramming, where in the New Age, we're told that it's about ascension. It's about becoming Christ consciousness. No. I think that's backwards. I think that's going through more programs, because I hit that Christ consciousness level at one point through these ayahuasca experiences, and I came back glowing. And Sheree and I, we were going out for like 2 or 3 days afterwards. People were just coming up to us and going, "Oh my God, your energy's so good. I just have to give you a hug." You know, it was incredible like that. And then what happened is I wasn't prepared for the boom, falling back on my face, the pendulum swinging the other way. You can't maintain that state. You can tap into that state, but you can't maintain that state. The Christ consciousness path is like, okay, we have to be that all the time, but you're setting yourself up for failure, because that's not who we're meant to be in this particular matrix. We're supposed to be able to operate in 3D. I got to a point where I wasn't able to operate into 3D, and when I operate in 3D, because I was vibrating so high, which then pushed me boom right back down, because I started to have to operate in 3D. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be Christ consciousness up here. Why am I operating in 3D? Because we have to, because we're in 3D. So then I realized, oh, wait a minute. The path is actually backwards. The path is raw consciousness.
That's not your car, is it?
I don't know. Okay. The neighbor took it out. Cool.
Fair enough.
Mine went off earlier today, and it was so weird. I think I hit the button with the thing, but no, that was a neighbor.
Okay, cool. Just making sure, neighborhood watch from a different hemisphere. Because I've heard people like the Christian narrative, or certain even different ways of spiritual narrative, where they're in Matrix, and it's not like when you say to certain people a computer simulation, they think an iMac that's plugged in and it's running, and it's like no. We're just using that language to try and help you identify with the idea.
It's the best language that we have right now.
Yeah.
We don't have the language to describe it, but this is the best that we have.
Yeah, it could be in the mind of a person that's picking his third nostril. It could be all that level type thing where, like at the end of Men in Black, where our galaxy's in a marble, where there these massive things being played.
It could be a dream that some guy named Bob is having. I don't know.
Exactly.
No, not really.
Exactly. He likes him called Bobby. And he has a brother called Rich. The idea, the galactic ascension machine, and we're moving forward. We're here to experience and learn, where it's not ascension. I can see where the term ascension comes from, where you're raising your vibration. It's like changing the channel from 7 to 8, and that's sort of you're ascending in that aspect. And I think also with the whole Christ consciousness thing, that could be another stage of the game in that respect, because we are multi-dimensional beings, and like I joke, like a lot of things come out as a joke, but there's truth behind it type thing. Last week I told a Christian that Jesus is the one and true, the only God. Yeah, that's true. So are you. Now, agreements were made, because when you tell people that they're the prime creator, they freak out. Well, why can't it? Agreements were made, and as you said, we're in the avatar having this experience. It's good to remember that there's so much more, and from my experience as well, don't worry about like, well, hang on, why can't I float and whatever, because you haven't got the code, you haven't done the side quests or the remembering. And most likely you've done all that in the dream world, which is the next level up. I always get the guys' names wrong, but I've especially watched your interviews with George Calaveras.
George Cavassalis.
Cavassalis.
George is one of my favorite people.
Yes.
There's not too many people I'm 100% sure about, but I can say I'm 100% sure. Okay, let me say 99.99999, just to leave myself a little bit of room. I'm 99.99999% sure about George. He is genuine.
I don't share often because most people go, what? But I had a moment that I had an experience / abduction of some entities. And the interesting thing is the lead up to the story is so much longer than the actual story. But an ex-girlfriend came over to visit my housemate, didn't say hello to me, and then left, which was out of character. And I had an emotional spike at that time. Why didn't she say hello? And my point of view / consciousness just went up instantly, and I'm on a table, and I had the galactic historian explain they look like greys, but they had perception filters on. There were different. I have to listen to.
Shapeshift.
Yeah,
they're shapeshifters. Yeah.
Or even just projection of light, doesn't matter. But they look like greys, which that means they can. Whoever has the experience blames the greys. Now, once I realized where I was, it makes me laugh. No one else laughs, but I basically said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Very British. What the hell are you doing? Grabbed one by the neck and threw it across the room, and I snapped straight back into my body. And I don't know if I was gone a nanosecond or an hour. I wasn't that long, but it was very short from when I had that spike and thing. Now, I think the reason is, and I'm leaning towards yes, is I heard George talk about his experience when he went to the moon. If you remember that anecdote where...
I do. I want to say this for the record, though. I think that George is completely genuine, but I don't agree with George 100%.
Yeah, so, same with me. Same with me. Yeah.
But I think everything he says, I think he comes from the heart, no doubt about it. And the reason I say that is because he's one of the few people that has come on the show consistently, and then he'll say, you know what, I was wrong about this last thing. New information has come in, so I'm changing my perspective. And I respect that so much.
Yes, yeah, like the whole Galactic Federation thing that he went through.
Exactly.
And he still brings that up to sort of go, bang. He's a gentleman, a statesman in that respect. We're rare. So he for the listeners, George was taken up to the moon and was strapped down, but he tapped into the God source, the spark or whatever. He went very, very deep to his true pure essence and broke the bonds. And you're familiar with the 4-minute mile, where no one could run 4 minutes till one guy did, and ever since that Bannister, ever since everyone can break 4 minutes because they know the story or they've heard it. And I think by hearing George tell that story, that gave me enough permission slip as Bashar. Now that's the entity, not the Prime Minister of Syria. I have to point that out sometimes. What?
I didn't even make that connection.
There you go. See. So yeah, Bashar, the six-dimensional entity, or the guy in Syria. But permission slip, or in computer, you're given that code that unlocks the ability. And I think that was when, because I have no idea before or after or anything else. From my perspective, in this waking level of 3D, I don't have any extraterrestrial type of experiences anymore, because I get the feeling of like, don't go near that guy. Very, very angry. And apparently I was told that the one I grabbed by the neck I killed. And so like, yeah, alien slayer. So, but that's sort of my, that's, I just want to mention with George, just by hearing even like people listening to this interview with you, you could listen to 3 hours of information. It's enjoyable, everything else like that. But one sentence, it clicks something in your experience, and then who knows? It opens a door, and like we don't have to wake people up. Like I think I'm here to make people laugh who have woken up.
There you go.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
We were doing ayahuasca for about 3 weeks straight. It was the longest session that we've ever done, and we weren't doing it every night. Sometimes it was sequential, but it was every other night. But we had just put everything to the side, dedicated this time to really go as deep as we can. And we were living out in the middle of nowhere on this lake, and we had this boat, so we would take the boat out in the middle of the lake. And one experience, we were sitting there on the boat, and then all of a sudden we see these grays right on the shoreline. And I look, and I'm like, I don't know. And you always have to go, is this a manifestation of the experience, or is the experience allowing me to see in a higher frequency? And I look at Sheree, and she's like, are those grays right there? And so we're both seeing them now. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like sitting there like watching us. And that's it, just watching us. So we go back, and I think that was like the final night of our experience, or maybe we had 1 or 2 more experiences after that. But a few days later, and we were still deintegrating from the experience. So again, it could have been a result of the experience. But I'm laying down on the couch, and Sheree comes walking downstairs, and all of a sudden the door flies open, and these 3 grays come walking in. And I look at Sheree, and I say, why are they wearing Halloween costumes? It's too early for trick-or-treating, or it's too early for Halloween. And then boom, I'm out. And that was it. The next day, she comes downstairs, and she said, I had the weirdest dream last night. I said, what did you dream? She said, I dreamt I came downstairs. You were laying on the couch. You said something about Halloween costumes, and 3 grays came walking in. And that's all that I remember. And I was like, oh, that's very strange. And then we find these, it looks like handprints, like these 3-fingered handprints on the microwave, outside, in a couple different places. I take photographs of them. And the more that we get into the experience, the more that we realize, I think there was some kind of struggle. There was something that was going on that day. It was very, very, very strange. But you had mentioned grays and a struggle with grays, which kind of prompted this particular memory. I don't know how I feel about that, but I know how I feel about the grays. And my experiences have been very, very, very clear. These things are archons. They're not nice. They're not. They're not benevolent, and they're not malevolent. They're computer programs within the Matrix, and they're running a particular script. And the script, it's whatever they do. Like they're not real. They don't have thoughts. They're a hive mind, and they're deployed by the artificial intelligence to do certain things. Some of the times I think they'll manifest as different entities. So they'll manifest as these blue avians, or they'll manifest as Palladians, or they'll manifest at whatever is in people's consciousness. And a lot of times they're looking for information. And the reason is that we, as the beings that came from outside, we have the ability to shift our frequency up and down. And they don't have the ability to shift their frequency up and down. So they're looking for our frequency so they can kind of piggyback upon when we shift our frequency up and down. And they're taking information or provoking different types of experiences, different types of thought patterns, things like that. I don't know what their complete agenda is, but I will say this: don't trust them. I don't talk to them.
And to add to that, it sort of goes with my experience as well. The grays can shapeshift or have different perceptions. There are other entities that would use grey as well to reinforce that dichotomy. Like just having the thought of like trying to explain to someone, so what's all this spirituality thing? Well, you're a soul in a human body that has DNA lineage. You also have experiences from your past lives as a soul, and you have the family, and it's just go bang, bang, bang. And, you've got, you're multidimensional. There's 49 different versions of you all existing at the same time. It's a rabbit hole just trying to explain who you are, which I find, and it's like, I'm just going to laugh and stay here. It's so much easier. But it's interesting. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, when we were in Egypt, we realized that there's actually a way to keep them away. There is the Egyptian winged sun disk. If you Google that, Egyptian winged sun disk, we notice this in the entryways of all of the Holy of Holies. For instance, Cleopatra's astrology room had one of these symbols as you walked in the door. The Temple of Isis had one of these symbols as you walked in the door. Every single temple in the inner sanctums all had this symbol.
Yeah.
And we were asking ourselves, what is the symbol? What is the symbol? And then when we did our ayahuasca ceremony in the Temple of Isis, the entity that we were interacting with, that was Isis, which is, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it's a computer program. It's a computer program to unlock our own consciousness. Like, we have our Isis part of our consciousness, which represents the divine feminine, but there's also a computer program as well. It's kind of like an unlocking program.
Is that because we're a multi-dimensional being in the game as at the same time as, or?
I think
that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Well, the way that I understand it is that we left ourselves little programs within the Matrix that we can interact with. Yeah. And I would even venture so far as to say that we left the psychedelics in the Matrix as well, that we coded them in so we can pass information from one life to another, or get kind of avoid the mind wipe. And the way the AI reads it is the AI reads it and just sees the chemical makeup of it. It doesn't see the information that's embedded within it. It doesn't see the information that's embedded within us either. It just sees the makeup and the overlays and all of that. We also hid information within the stones themselves. And I realized when we were touching stones, we were getting certain types of information. Other stones we weren't touching, and we weren't getting any information from. But the artificial intelligence only sees a stone. It doesn't see the information that's embedded in there. So we embedded it in a way to where only our frequency can pick up on it. But one of the things that became clear was, number one, don't trust the grays, which I already knew. But number two, in order to deter them, you put one of these winged sun discs up. And we've got them as soon as you walk into our house over our front door. We've got one over here, over this window. We've got one over here. I mean, we do it for decoration, but the main thing is one to protect the barrier. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like, we have some made out of stone that we actually hang. That's just for decoration. I mean, you can just take a printed out copy and put it next to your bed or something like that. And if you're having gray problems, they somehow can't interact with that symbol. And from what I understand that symbol represents, it represents divinity. And it's like saying, I know my own divinity, stay away. You're not allowed to cross this barrier here. And it's worked. Ever since we put these up, no interaction with grays whatsoever.
Oh, nice. I did an interview with John Edmonds, who just released a book about Stardust Ranch. And he's had an interesting, if you're familiar with that story of in Arizona, where there's a portal that's been placed there 8,000 years ago, and everything happens basically on that ranch. And a lot of actual grays, because he's chopped their heads off with a samurai sword. And it's basically, if you shoot them, they go, ow, stop that. But if you remove their heads, they kind of stop doing things. Now, I'm not saying everyone go buy a samurai sword for you. Just do the sun disc, much easier, less violent. It is fascinating that I'll mention that, though, to John if I talk to him again, because he's had other people where there's such a big realm, and I'm amazed that a lot of people in sci-fi the fandom haven't just, even if they don't believe any of it's true, it's so fascinating. It's like, you can see why, say, Stargate resonates with a lot of people. I only started watching that because David Wilcock, but I liked him in the earlier days. He's done good work sometimes, but he mentioned that the first two seasons of Stargate is basically true because there's the Guald or whatever they're called that pretend to be the gods of Egypt. I did enjoy the film as well. I started watching season 1 and then I finished season 10. I just followed all that through. It is fascinating to see what resonates in the past as well, like making that connection we did with Egypt and Atlantis, because it's like, well, that kind of makes sense. Spirit Science have done a cartoon type history of I think Atlantis. There was entities
I love
from
those
Mars.
Cartoons.
Yeah,
those are brilliant.
Yes, the Nazis basically came from Mars and they entered Atlantis and they screwed up there as well. And there's so many different things. In a way, it's fun. I think that's part of the experience. like we are in the Garden of Eden, but there's been a virus being put into the simulation, and it's we're stuck. That's
Yeah.
sort of, and so we could.
Well, and the virus is very, very deeply embedded within the system,
Yeah,
and this is what we're essentially, with the energy work that we're doing with many others, we're trying to expel this virus out of the system, rebalance the matrix, so we can have the option of leaving if we want to leave when it's time to leave.
yeah,
But this virus is, I don't want to get too dark in this particular show, but I'm sure you're familiar with the pizza related stuff.
yeah.
That's the virus at its very core. It's not about, they think that it's just a bunch of sickos that do these horrible things. It's not. We're dealing with vampires, a vampiric type of force
Energy.
that's inside of this matrix. You can call them reptilians, and maybe they look like reptilians, but they're not supposed to be in this matrix. This was not part of the design. They may have hacked their way in here from another place, but I think it was a virus that was manifested within the matrix itself. But they feed upon the life essence, and they feed upon the soul itself. And so it's like, the way I likened it is like you have a sponge, and the sponge is the soul itself. As it moves through the game, it starts to generate the life experience, and the life experience creates energy, the ups and downs and happiness and sadness and everything. And they're feeding not only upon that, but they're actually feeding upon the sponge itself, because they realize that's an energy source. And that needs to be expelled, because take a look at, like, right now, we're sitting here, we're having a real high frequency conversation. I'm sure it's beautiful over there where you are. Back here, it's beautiful nighttime sky, everything is great, but there's still this underlying energy current. Whether we experience it face to face or not, it's still always there, and it's just creating this interference and distortion in the energies that's not supposed to be there. So this virus has to be eliminated from the system. And when I realized how this virus works, when I realized the rituals that take place and why they're doing the rituals and what they're doing and creating the off balance within the matrix itself, and that was one of the things that I took into the ayahuasca realm, and I fully understood. It stained my soul so bad that it took a while to decompress from it. We started making a film called Pizzagate Apocalypse, and it was we only got 60 minutes into it, and we were going to do like a 90-minute film, and it was really nice, like great graphics, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized I was spending so much time putting the graphics together and everything and playing all this stuff in a loop that this stuff was starting to infect me. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. We showed the film one time, and then I put it away. And I wound up deleting it about a year ago, because I thought, oh, no, I'm never going to revisit this stuff. And then boom, here we are. It's becoming more relevant now than ever before. Yeah. But so I put it away. And another thing, I didn't want people like interviewing me about it. I didn't want them asking, oh, I want to get you on the show to talk about this, because I didn't want to be in that frequency or energy. But I realized that was the adversary. I realized that's what we have to expel from the system. And so the action to that is through the ayahuasca understanding, through understanding who we are. That's what took us to Egypt, to try to find answers as to what we need to do to expel this virus. And I realized that in past lives, we'd left ourselves information to go off of on how to expel this virus. I hope that's making sense, because again, it's a huge story. But what it culminated into was doing ayahuasca within the temple of Hatshepsut, within the temple of Isis, and within the Great Pyramid itself. And we had the Great Pyramid to ourselves the entire night. We kicked everybody else out, and it was just me and Sheree in the entire pyramid. We went down to the subterranean chamber, into the Queen's Chamber. Both areas have been closed off for about 20 years. They unlocked those doors for us. We have HD footage of the subterranean chamber on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/beyondtheveil. And once we finally got up to the King's Chamber is when we actually did our ritual, which started the process of debugging the system and removing the virus from the system, with this huge amount of energy work that took place. And what happened is Egypt had a 3-day flood right after that. It was knocking buildings down. People were getting fired from the government because of this flood. At the Temple of Hatshepsut, we actually live streamed it on Facebook. It was a beautiful blue sky, and I thought to myself, no, there's no way it's going to rain today. No. This was 7 hours away from the pyramid as well. The Temple of Hatshepsut, we leave, and on that, as soon as we get back to the hotel, literally, it starts to storm, and we've got all this on video. We're live streaming all of this. The electricity goes out. Boats are flipping over in the Nile. Power lines are being knocked down and everything like that. And we're looking and going, this is incredible. Now we got two in a row, 7 hours apart. We go out to the Temple of Abydos, which is 2.5 hours into the desert. Again, we're doing live stream. We're doing meditation work. We're doing energy work. It starts raining in Abydos for the first time in 15 years. And the guys are looking around and going, this is the first time it's rained in 15 years. And we're like, this is incredible. And the taxi driver that was driving us around, he started joking around and going, you guys are bringing the rain here, aren't you? We've never seen rain like this before. It was incredible to watch the physical manifestation of the energy work. Or we just happened to be there, and it coincided very, very, very coincidentally with the stuff we were doing. I don't necessarily know if that, I don't know which one. People can decide whatever they want to believe as far as that goes. Any way it goes, it was either the most epic psychedelic experience in the history of the world, for me personally anyways, or we did some hardcore energy work and reset the matrix. Now, this was done in 2018 in May. We are 2 years after May 2018, almost to the month. We were told in Egypt that it was going to be a 4-year cycle that took place. All the energy work we did was going to take 4 years to physically manifest within this matrix. We're right at the halfway point. Now we have this global shutdown. Is it all just one big coincidence? I don't know. We've got the video of all of this. So I wouldn't be talking about this if we didn't have this on video. Just for people out there.
I have seen the video.
The videos are there.
Well, I'm going to go in the middle and say that you're part of whatever was happening. It was Team Humanity doing their thing, and this is sort of where we can step into what's happening now. As you can tell, we're going a bit longer than the hour.
Oh, it's no problem.
I know. I'll just let him go. Wind him up and eat. It's interesting to see what. As I was mentioning earlier, that the virus is exposing everything. Because you've said other virus, the COVID-19, that experience is pushing everything forward and exposed everything. And I can't sort of, when you sense things. You mentioned earlier with the energy of, we don't see, we don't feel certain things happening. I don't see the New World Order manifesting. Someone's trying to probably do that, but they're failing at it. Because, you get reports of, it's interesting how they use Trump as a savior. So I try and avoid that savior program, if I can say it that way. Trump's doing his bit. That much we know.
I would say so. I would say, too, at the State of the Union, he mentioned going after the child traffickers. I don't know if you caught that. Just recently, about 2 weeks ago, he was doing one of the coronavirus updates, and all of a sudden he decides he's going to go after the war on drugs, and he's going to send battleships or aircraft carriers out to go fight the quote-unquote drug traffickers. And he had a reporter there. I could tell it was set up by him to ask this particular question. Are you going after anything else besides drugs? And he says, we're going after trafficking. He says, we're going to get him. We're going to hit him. We're going to hit him hard.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. The whole Ukraine thing was all about the human trafficking, the organ harvesting, all of this stuff. The China stuff was all about human trafficking, organ harvesting. It had a lot more to it, but that was also part of it. And so we're watching the virus removed from the system as a result of the energy work that we all did together to get us to this point. And so here we are in the middle of a global shutdown. I think the virus is being removed. As much as my 3D body is saying the New World Order is here, this is complete tyranny, this and that, et cetera, my higher self is stepping in and saying, no. This is exactly what needs to happen in order to
Yeah.
remove this virus. And I'm not going along the lines of the Q stuff. I think the Q
Yeah.
stuff is BS. And as you mentioned, the David Wilcock stuff, it's been the same thing. Oh, the cabal is going to be arrested. I mean, I've been hearing this for the last 10 years, every 3 months. I don't understand how he gets away with doing this so much, because he's been, I mean, just recently he did this whole 3 days of darkness thing. The internet's going to turn off for 3 days and this and that. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. If they turn off the internet for 3 days, it's going to be complete panic. You know, they don't want panic. So, but there is some truth to it, in the sense that I think Trump is going after the network. The network is where the virus runs through. And it's not about arresting these people. A lot of people want to see these mass arrests and this and that, and maybe that'll come later. But what I think Trump is doing is he's going after the network itself and closing off the pathways to make sure that this can't happen again. Because you take the players out and you leave those pathways open, they're just going to be replaced with different players. He's closed the network.
Well, we've seen that. I used to call it Team Dark or Bob, but Andrew Barton's mentioned there's a league. So it's just, for me, it's black hats, white hats. You know, spy versus spy in Mad Magazine. It just makes it easier. We've seen that up until this point, which sort of helped create Trump in a certain way, because the cabal has slowly been slowly having its revenue stream cut down. The drugs and everything. It's a slow burn. Also, Andrew asked the question of what's in the last 10 years, what's the conspiracy world put new, and it really hasn't. The 10 years of just spinning wheels, and it's interesting to see how the conspiracy world is reacting now because of all this is happening. I think some people are glad it's happening because, look, I was right. It's very ego-based, sort of 3D. It's like, no. Then there's other people freaking out because it's actually something's actually happening, and there is 3 or 4 different narratives. The Trump's saving everybody. Trump's bringing in a new world order. Q, which I follow occasionally, just as a marker in the timeline. It's just like, oh, okay, that's it's on my multi-dimensional radar, where it's like, oh, you're doing that, but trust the plan. Well, I've watched The Last Jedi. I'm not going through that again. What's the plan?
Did you really watch The Last Jedi? I couldn't sit through it. Actually, I posted a meme that said, "You think 2020 is bad? Did you forget about 2017?" And it had a Last Jedi poster.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Well, I'll explain. I'll reveal now what I'm actually doing for the Disney Star Wars trilogy. I'm going to do a parody of it, like doing a voiceover dub of it all, and just basically do jokes and everything else like that. So I'll have to watch the movies over and over again so I can find a story and just put things. So don't be surprised if you get a Facebook message like, yeah, I need a voice. Can you read these lines into a microphone? And
have you seen that video, My Stick?
Yes.
That song was stuck in my head for like a month.
The seagull one beforehand. Seagull. Then I got hit in the head by a hacky sack. Where did it come from? In the breakdown of that song, Yoda is going, I rolled over a log and I saw a stick, and I thought that log had a child. And I think that's where my stick came from, because that's a brilliant gag. You can buy these songs on iTunes. So, yeah, I have to buy that one. But, yeah, those guys, bad lip reading. So it's an element of that in that parody of just taking the piss out of it, because I remember Star Wars, where there's a high connection through spirituality. A lot of people, when the prequels came out, I don't understand it, Trade Federation, blah, blah, blah. Lucas is just pointing out how war's been run for 1,500 years. And if you have to have that explained to you, it's like, please don't vote.
Did you hear his original vision for the latest 3 before he sold it to Disney?
I've heard a little bit all about the wills and metachlorian and going very spiritual. It's like, I don't know if it would have worked the same, but I still want to. Please write the book.
Well, the premise was that everything that's happening in the physical world is being dictated by these microcosm by these beings called the wills.
Yes.
And I thought that's actually pretty fascinating. I think it would have made a better story. I liked
Yeah.
I liked The Force Awakens though. That was a good one. I
Oh,
couldn't watch The Last Jedi, and the last one I rented it the other day. I didn't even watch it. I started watching it. I fell asleep. It's a shame.
yeah. Well, yeah, I saw Last Jedi in the cinemas. I wasn't a fan of The Force Awakens because I could see the first 45 minutes. I was like, oh, they're going somewhere. Then it just turned into A New Hope, and it was a remake.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much. I think
yeah,
that's why I liked it though. It was,
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, but and so I thought like, okay, well, I had to watch it 6 or 7 times to see why people liked it, and then oh, okay, yeah, cool. Haven't watched it. Oh, I've watched it once or twice. Like you can rewatch that one. Then, all right, well, it's only part one. Let's see what part two is. And my expectation was I would get an epic story that would pay off the story that was put forward. And then we got The Last Jedi. You were just upset that your theories didn't work out. Like my theory was I wanted a good movie. just and then the part 9. I watched it once, and like, okay, just to see how the story ends. Like, okay, I can definitely make jokes out of this quite easily. I'm thinking Pizza Wars, and the whole galactic battle is over pineapple. Yes or no on pizzas? And especially with the coronavirus as well, with the Emperor with his fingers, it's like I've watched the Emperor hasn't been in the galaxy for 30 years because he still thinks there's a coronavirus going out, and anyway. That's where he's all pale. It's like I've been washing my hands for decades. But I tried to watch it the second time. I got half an hour in. I'm like, this is boring. Click. I don't resonate with the characters. It's basically it's like two directors having an ego battle. There was no plan, but I've discovered the extended universe books. I just read Darth Plagueis, which is like the prequel to the Phantom Menace, and I'm like, oh. But there's there's that very quickly. There is that spiritual connection, which is that basic light side, dark side, where you can learn things. Like I've learned from The Last Jedi. I can be emotionally engaged if it's a higher frequency. If it's a lower frequency, I can recognize it, and I can step back. Like sometimes I go through Twitter and it's like, oh, this is fun. I can do jokes and everything else like that. Other times 7 minutes, like, oh, bad energy, click, turned off, walk away.
Yeah. Well, there's a video game series that I got into, and it was just incredible storytelling. The voice acting was just amazing. And they cut it off in 2003, and people have been waiting for a sequel. There was supposed to be another one that came out in 2005, never came out. There was another one that got canceled, another one that got canceled. And somebody recently did a video and said this is why they should not remake this video game series, or they should not make a continuation.
Yeah.
The main actor, or one of the main actors, he's like 90 years old now. Another one of the main actors passed away. The writer went off to go work for another video game company, and his argument was this was a very unique special sauce that was put together with all these people coming together, and you can't replicate that. And I think that's what happened with the prequels and the sequels to Star Wars. Is the first three had a very unique blend with Harrison Ford and
Carrie Fisher,
oh my God,
and
the
Mark
guy
Hamill.
who plays the Joker. Why can't I think of his name? Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill, yeah. All of them, they all created the special sauce, and it was missing from the other ones.
Yeah, prequels. George needed someone. I can't remember his name. The producer of the first three. He needed someone to say no occasionally to George. That's sort of a condensed version of some. He's like, oh, we could do this. He's like, no, that's silly. He just needed someone. He just needed a no man once in a while there. With Disney, it was a cash grab. It didn't work because of destroying the franchise. They had an idea of because they saw the MCU, the Marvel Cinema Universe. And it's like we can do that. And the episodes, the saga was every 2 years. The 6 films beforehand with Lucas were every 3 years because he would release the movie, then the next day start working on the sequel. These were overlapping. And that's why it didn't work because and there was no plan to start with. Even with the prequels, they're every 3 years, and it just it lets you digest what the story is and the motivations, and like I can still watch the Phantom Menace. It's like, is that the Millennium Falcon landing on Coruscant? Oh wow! This is what it's not like a Mandela effect. It's just being aware when Jango Fett gets his head cut off in Attack of the Clones. Boba Fett picks up the helmet, and it's like, well, where's the head? Is it stuck in there? Someone actually caught this and shared it on Twitter. When Mace Windu, mother loving Mace Windu, because it's Samuel Jackson, he cuts off his head. When the head's flying, you see the shadow of his head come out of the helmet. And it's like, there's your detail. It's like just a logic detail. It's like you don't see the head at all because it's an energy weapon, so it'll be clean cut. But yeah, someone actually found it and shared it, and all these Star Wars fans are like, oh, no way! It's like the movie's been out for 18 years, people, and I never caught that as well.
Well, Sam Jackson is one of my favorite actors.
Yeah,
but that was bad casting. I was expecting him to go, say dark side again one more goddamn time.
May the force be with you. And if he's on a starship, all these snakes, yeah. So we'll figure something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that story, though, that story is a very ancient story. And it's one that echoes within us because it's the story of ascension. You have the farm boy. He realizes his own power. He gets a light sword. He goes out and fights the darkness. He takes on the entire universe. He takes on the artificial intelligence as well. Darth Vader's mostly machine. The Death Star is a machine, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same esoteric hero's journey, ascension story that we're all experiencing in one way or another, which is, I think, why it resonates so much and why it's so timeless.
Yes, that's why I don't see that with Rey in the Disney thing. It's like, I'm super. I'm like, it's been 3 minutes. What are you talking about? We're only 3 minutes into the film.
Well, and then like lightsabers, they just like knock people out. Yeah. And then she has all this Jedi power with no training,
Yeah, little things. It's like that.
A lot of holes.
Yeah, a little. You could drive a Star Destroyer through. Yeah, and that's one thing I find interesting. Where I call them the powers that were, because since World War II, they haven't achieved that much. A lot of people say we're in a very dark world. It's like, yeah, because that's been exposed. It's always been there for centuries. We're just aware of it now, and it's our reaction to see what we do. And we start podcasts and go on YouTube and everything else like that. I don't see how they can keep releasing movies like The Hunger Games in a Hunger Games society. Because the thought you see on screen, like rebellions, like, well, someone's going to go, we should do that. I don't, yeah. No. Someone said, I don't know who said it, but someone did say if the New World Order came in, it would last 8 months.
That's true. Well, let me say this. So in August of 2017, there was an eclipse. I don't know if you remember this one. All the New Agers were running out. It was supposed to take on the whole totality of the United States, and I don't know, maybe other parts. Yeah. So they all wanted to run out, be in the totality of this eclipse, and they were going to get this divine code sprinkled on them and all of this. And I just didn't feel right about it. I was like, you know what? I want to stay away from this event. But something prompted me, something sparked within me to drink some ayahuasca on that morning. And we hadn't fasted. We hadn't done anything. Like, we had barbecue the night before. And my wife, as soon as we wake up, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, she's looking at me, she's like, you want to drink ayahuasca right now? We haven't fasted, we haven't done anything, we haven't prepared. And I'm like, no, let's just, you know what, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, let's just go ahead and do it. So I get into this divine code and I start feeling it, and I was really apprehensive about it. But as I started to be inside of it, especially in the ayahuasca state, I was like, this is beautiful. This is perfect. This is exactly what people need. It's merging into whatever people need, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a really, really euphoric experience. And then my higher self grabbed me and pulled me out and was like, look at what is giving this divine code. And I stood there and I saw this giant one-eyed octopus-like creature coming out of the sun. It put its tentacle out and started sprinkling it over everybody. This was August of 2017. October of 2017, Stranger Things came out. Stranger Things 2. I don't know if you remember that. The adversary was this giant octopus that lives interdimensionally. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. We start seeing more of this interdimensional octopus as symbology. Going back to Star Wars, which is where I'm taking all of this, the movie Solo. Solo, he goes out to the middle of the galaxy and he fights an octopus-like being that's in the middle of the galaxy, or he has to pass through it or something like that.
Yeah.
You remember that part?
Yeah, it's the Kessel Run in it's like a galactic cloud, and there's this Leviathan type of creature where he tricks I can't remember. Yeah, they jettison the lifeboat, and that hits the thing and he can get away. Yeah. But it's interesting that, also, I don't know if you've seen Picard. Don't. It's terrible. But right at the end, they have the AIs, the synthetics, the children of Data. They open a portal to these ancient old AI, and they just look like tentacles with claws at the end. But it's all metal and robotic. But the idea is that they open this portal, and then the sentient beings, the AI kills every organic living thing in the galaxy so they can rule supreme again. Mm-hmm. And so, it's this running theme. I think Discovery did the same thing where AI, it's just unfortunately they call it Star Trek and it's crap. But in the story-wise,
What year was Picard?
This year. Just finished
it's this year. Okay.
Yeah, it just finished about a month ago.
So what do you make of all this? Because, okay, so the stuff we talk about, we document. It's all on video. You can go to our YouTube channel. You can see August of 2017. We were talking about this. And then after this, all of these different shows start to come out showing this adversary, which is this giant octopus.
Yeah.
What do you think's going on here?
In the conspiracy world, they would say it's predictive programming. They're being told they have to make these ideas and show these things. I'm more leaning towards that they tap into the higher self or the divinity, creative divinity, or even the lesser version of creative divinity in the Matrix, and they get a similar idea and they transmute it through their lens.
I agree with you. 100% on that.
It's just like an idea, like, okay, well, what's a possibility of humanity's enemy? We've done Russians, we've done blah blah blah. Oh, robots are coming. The Matrix films. It's you can see how quite easily you can get to the same basic story point by just following the thing. Well, we need an enemy. Well, we can't really piss off everyone in, say, China because we want them to watch the film. Well, what about if it's an aliens? Oh, yeah, but aliens are slow, with the greys, blah, blah, blah. Oh, AI, robots. Yeah, all right, let's do robots. And what's scary? Well, I've been reading this H.P. Lovecraft book, trying to steal ideas, and octopuses, giant leviathans, and so on and so forth. And I think it's like, even I'm a Doctor Who fan, except for the latest year because the storytelling is terrible. They're creative things. It's like, that seems poignant to today. I'm a big Battlestar Galactica fan. The reimagining. They had no idea. It takes 6 to 9 months from making it to releasing it. There was episodes going out of waterboarding and torturing a Cylon the same week that Bush was dealing with waterboarding in Abu Ghraib or whatever it was. Now, the synchronicity of that is fascinating. That's where I'm getting that the divine idea being downloaded into the people, and they just use it. It's like, because I don't know if you've ever watched Battlestar Galactica, the reimagining from the one from 2003. No. It is fascinating because it's an AI, the Cylons, destroys humanity. There's only 50,000 humans left, and so they try and find this mythical 13th tribe, which is called Earth, and it's a wagon train through space.
The 13th tribe. Yeah,
it's very Old Testament-esque.
Yeah,
and they use all the very Greek, like Apollo and Gemini, but they change the words occasionally, like Pycon instead of Pisces, and so they do that. And that's how they figure out where Earth possibly is when you see those star constellations, and it leads to the planet. Spoilers, but they find their version of Earth, and 2,000 years ago it was irradiated by nuclear weapons, and then 2 seasons later, they randomly end up on Earth. I'll just, on this planet. So it's, if it resonates with, it's fascinating because they're dealing with the Cylons and how they don't die. If they're near a resurrection ship, they reincarnate. Like if you're fighting me, I'm a Cylon near the resurrection ship. If you kill my body, my consciousness or energy goes into the resurrection ship, and I just go download into a new body, and I wake up and go about my day. It's basically like reincarnation without the mind wipe, and so you can remember all the lessons of being killed. Like, I'm not going to turn my back on that guy again, that type of thing. So
interesting.
And that is 2003. From the reimagining, the original one was 77, 78, where there was a lizard race that created the Cylons as robots, and then they turned on them or they died out, and the Cylons were led by themselves type thing. And so you don't have to watch the original one, but it's fascinating because they use a lot of member berries, where they've got the old show as the new show, because there's 40 years. Yeah, because there's a Cylon war, and then all of a sudden it stops, and you haven't heard from them for 40 years. And then a hot blonde model turns up who's a Cylon, kills this guy, and that's how it starts.
Nice. I need to watch more movies. I can't sit in front of the TV. There's something about the frequency of the TV. It just does not resonate.
Yeah, I don't hardly watch the news. So I read headlines, and if I then maybe force myself to read the attempt at journalism in the articles, like, oh crap. Oh, this is a bit of information linked to the headline, and no, it's not. Click. So,
one thing I did watch, I watched the impeachment, and I watched a good amount of the impeachment. And I was watching, and I knew that they did this. It's just watching it firsthand was incredible. They would have somebody say something, and then the mainstream media would take that little soundbite and completely flip it around in the perspective that they wanted. And I'm like watching, and it was consistent. Like every single thing the mainstream media was talking about, they were taking small soundbites. So they had the IG testifying, just to give you an example here, and they were asking, did your office follow protocol? Oh yeah, we followed protocol. Everything was completely spot on, and they ran with that, and they were like, look, everything was this whole impeachment, all protocol was all ran spot on, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And the guy was talking about how they followed all the protocol, and then he went on to say they found nothing wrong, everything was fine, et cetera, et cetera. They completely leave that part out and completely spin it. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, I can't believe it. I already knew it. Just watching it firsthand, though, was really, really, really revealing.
Yeah. Well, can you tell me what he did to warrant the impeachment? Because it's like, we're impeaching the president. Why? He did things. Like what?
So the way this coronavirus thing happened was really interesting, and this all ties in together. Because what he was doing is he was going after the networks where money laundering, that's the way they were calling it, money laundering. It was an energy company in the Ukraine that was laundering money. Why does an energy company need to launder money? Because it's drugs, it's human trafficking, it's organ harvesting, it's all that stuff. So the day the coronavirus hit the news was the same day that his defense team was supposed to go in front of the Senate. And I was watching I was watching the defense team. The defense team started naming names. Who got what money, the amounts of money they got, where the money went, so on and so forth, and we're just completely naming all the corruption. And the mainstream media was like, okay, we're not talking about impeachment anymore. Coronavirus.
Yeah.
Which led me to believe at first, when I heard coronavirus, I was like, that's just a cover. that's just a cover to get people's attention away from here. I had no idea it was going to wind up in a complete shutdown the way it did. But that was kind of coincidental the way that happened. So as soon as that happened, so that's what he did wrong. He was going after the network. And
I could see it's sort of like the coincidence of it is a small one where it bumps the story from the mainstream, but in a bigger loop. it's a win, because now everyone's locked down. It is so easy for SWAT teams to get to somewhere without anyone knowing, and because not saying that every citizen is a criminal, but it would be so much easier now to try and do all this work of finding, everything's shut down. So like, well, why are you out? What's all those kids in the back of your van type thing, or whatever it is. The networks themselves would be on shutdown. And it's interesting to see how that this is the positive angle of, not timeline, but the positive side of the coin of, trust the plan and everything else like that. And Trump's doing all this stuff.
Yeah, it could be. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I'm really skeptical. I just want to put this on the record of Q. Q said trust Sessions. Trust Sessions was a piece of crap. But I don't like the trust the plan thing. It doesn't feel right.
No,
it's like, let's take things one step at a time, and we'll figure out what we do at every stone. Every stepping stone, we'll figure out if the next one is the right one to go to. Don't trust the plan.
Yeah, well, what's the plan?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, trust the plan. I would if I knew what it was.
Nanobot vaccines.
Well, that's the other side. Well, have you noticed Bill Gates has been hammered now? Like he mentioned, like, this is very dangerous of the United States government of defunding the World Health Organization, or WHO, and his Instagram. Apparently, they've been deleting. Like, this is the 4th time I've talked to you. You suck. That was condensing. They've just cut. They're just like, he's being hammered so much. Andrew put forward that he's trying to make up for his indiscretions. He realizes that things are going bad. And it's like, oh, I'll be a good guy now. It's like, well, no, you released Windows 11, or whatever it is.
Well,
not going to happen.
The whole thing with cutting the WHO funding, I thought that was brilliant, and that just shows that Trump is, in my opinion, still on our side. Now, of course, like I said, we're watching every single step as we're going, and if there's a step in the wrong direction, we'll definitely call it out. But right now, everything seems to be stepping in the right direction. One of the recent things that happened, and I don't know if you had picked up on this or covered this at all, but Marina Abramovich, does that name sound familiar?
Was she in the new Microsoft ad?
She was in the new Microsoft ad.
Yeah.
Back to the pizza related stuff here. And again, I don't want to get too graphic because it makes people's stomach queasy, and it makes mine queasy as well. But the way that they were funneling a lot of this stuff, at least here in the United States, was through the art. Tony Podesta's art, John Podesta's art. You can see the disgusting things within the art themselves. But I always wondered, why would people pay millions of dollars for these art pieces? Because they were funneling the money for the blood trade through the art as well. One of the artists that came up was Marina Abramovich. And Marina Abramovich, her big thing is cannibalism. And a lot of her pieces revolve around cannibalism. It was very telling that these vampires, the public displays that they do, I think, is indicative of the private things that go on, except with real bodies instead of the cakes and stuff that they bring out in the public displays. But yeah, that all ties into this whole coronavirus thing now, because Bill Gates put her up as he made a big commercial for the virtual reality headset based around her artwork, so people can quote unquote experience her artwork through this virtual reality headset. And it's the most disturbing thing in the world. For the listeners that are familiar with Marina Abramovich, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and most people are now. So it's funny to see the coronavirus now tied in with Marina Abramovich and the virus itself that we're talking about here, the energy harvesting virus. And what I think was happening is this virus, it not only feeds in the shadows by the people who are actually engaging within the stuff that's going on, but it also draws energy from awareness when it's brought into the light. So it was drawing energy from me, for example, when I was making that film, because I was deep in it. I don't have to be on that side. I can be on the other side. As long as it's in my consciousness, it's starting to feed upon my energy. I think with this, go ahead.
It creates loosh, as it's referred to.
Yes.
Where even you just do it like my tagline when I remember it for my roundtable is like tainting loosh since 2015, and that's all the laughter and stuff. But that does make sense, because even if it's just a minute little drop, by you engaging with it, this is the whole experiment thing. The whoever is observing the experiment is entangled on a certain level. And so by you, as you were talking about with the documentary, if you're focusing on that, trying to make the best thing is the information, I can see why you've gone, no, that's enough, because you can feel it being drained through. And I'll let you. So I just want to interject that. So continue on, please.
No, that was brilliant. So let me say, let me take it back here to the virtual reality thing.
Yeah.
What this felt like energetically was the virus, the network is being eliminated, and because it was like the virus, or a parasite rather, the host is dying. So now it's trying to find a new host. So now by putting on that virtual reality headset and experiencing that, the virus gets to embed into whoever's experiencing it.
As above, so below.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think this was a huge victory for us by getting them to not only remove the commercial, but I don't think they're going to move forward with that application at this point because of the amount of public backlash. So I think that was phenomenal.
I think because the main connection there between the product and the customer is money, and if people go, no, we don't want that, we can't make money out of this, and there's that element of control, because if they put it out and it fails, they look like idiots. So they're probably just, we'll restore it. We'll bring it up a bit later when not everyone's a bit,
Yes,
antsy.
I think that they will try to slide it back in later for sure.
Yeah,
but
when they can control, where everyone's slightly more calmer, they can start doing ads. They tried it once now, and they freaked out. It's like we'll have to go back to the advertising company. It's like, okay, less cocaine on this idea, please, guys. All right, and then try and figure. But by then, see. We're three quarters of the way through April, and 2020's been fun, hasn't it? And I like the for eyesight 2020, and I think that's what we're seeing. As we're seeing wins and not even losses, where they're trying every time the black hats push forward, they stumble, drop the ball, or are pushed back. Because like a lot of people now, how long? Because I think it's been about 3-4 weeks here that we've been in. I call it shutdown. That's the part of the language. It's physical distancing and shutdown. Saying social distancing and lockdown, different reaction in the brain. So it's because you leave the house, not really shut down. They suck.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I said that on a recent show that we should really call this a shutdown because this was voluntary. And somebody posted on Facebook, what have you learned from this lockdown? And I said, well, I learned that they really don't need to implement martial law because people will just give up their freedoms voluntarily, because that's really what it is. It's all voluntary. All these businesses just said, okay, we're going to shut down. What?
Yeah. Yeah, well, apart from this fear of being fined and the fear of the actual COVID virus coming out. However, as weeks keep adding up, the fear of the virus is like, well, I'm going insane. I'm getting cabin fever, and there may be more deaths down the line. I'll take my chances with the virus, as well as the data that's coming out, because say 18 to 35-year-olds, if your immune system is strong, we could still have that part of society working. The kids, for whatever reason, and not isolate, that's the wrong word, but we look after the elderly, and they may be in sort of shutdown or this distancing type thing, so they don't wipe them out. But it was fascinating. I think the black hats are doing the big push. I don't care where it started, because anything that happens, they've got plans and contingencies, and never let a good crisis go to waste. And so it took a while, but then they implemented. Like, one theory is that China let out the virus from their country because their economy sucked, and so the rest of the world could suck as well, and so they'll be all on equal footing again. Now, don't know if that's true or not, but as an observation, it makes sense, because they shut down and everything else like that. I'm getting mixed reports from Wuhan. It's like, we're out of lockdown, everything's fine. The next day, 1,000 people are sick again. We're shutting down, and we're opening, and we're closing, and we're opening, and we're closing. So,
well, in order to close down the entire world, I would say that there has to be something bigger than a pandemic, in my opinion. I wondered, are we potentially at war with China? this all happened on the same time when the trade deal was being signed as well, and we were basically holding their feet to the fire, and they were going to sign, or they did sign whatever Trump proposed, but they were being treated fairly for the first time, instead of having this huge advantage that the oligarchs had given them prior, because the oligarchs were putting money directly in their pockets. So I noticed that they locked down Washington, then they locked down California, they locked down New York. And when I saw those three locked down, it may not happen in that exact order, but when I saw those three happen and they started sending military units to those areas, I said, Florida is going to be next, because that's how you protect all of your coast right there. If you're waiting for something, if you're waiting for some kind of impact, they sent hundreds of tanks through New York. There's video footage of this, hundreds of tanks in Washington, for example. So are they waiting for an impact, possibly coming back from China? We've speculated on this, and our response to being attacked with a bioweapon is nuke them immediately. That's our policy, because a bioweapons, it goes against the Geneva Convention. So we just
you can't control it.
Yeah, push the button. And at first, Trump was saying it was a hoax. Then China came out and said the U.S. military released it. Now Trump is doing an investigation on the Wuhan lab. So I wonder if he knows, and he's known, this was a bioweapon. The only problem that I have with that is that there haven't been enough people killed, unless this thing has a longer incubation period. Where something can happen six weeks down the line, 8 weeks down the line. I don't know. But that's definitely one possibility. The other possibility is that something was coming from the sky, and they were preparing for some kind of asteroid impact or something like that. I know we had this comet Atlas that was supposedly here and supposedly has been broken up. It was supposed to be 5 times the size of Jupiter. The problem is I've heard this story 10 times in the last 10 years. You hear this 2011 with Comet Elenin, and it's the same thing repeated over and over again. So I was like, I'm taking it with a grain of salt. But I did legitimately see something green in the sky about a week ago, and this thing was legitimately there, and it's legitimately broken up now. I wonder if maybe the shutdown was in preparation for something like that. And what they did, you remember that movie Armageddon? They sent out a mining crew to go try to blow it up. Maybe they successfully blew it up. That's a possibility too. I don't know, but it just doesn't make sense for such a weak virus to shut down the entire world. And we can look and say, people were coming to me and saying, well, this is, America, they wanted to do this and do that. And it's like, well, wait a minute, this isn't just America though. This is the entire world that's shutting down. So I don't know. There's other possibilities. I'm not saying any of those are accurate. No, I'm just trying to piece the puzzle, piece the puzzle together.
And that's kind of why I like your show, listening to you as well, because we take the safeties off and ask questions, and there's nothing wrong with it. At the end of the show, it could be 3 hours later, like, well, we didn't achieve anything except for looking at questions and trying to make connections and speculations, like a possibility of this and this, and we may have gone back to the start, but the next show you don't have to go through 3 hours of figuring all that out, because you've done it last week. And then if a bit of information comes up, it's like, oh, remember last week when you said A, B, and C, and that's like with comedy, you make connections that people don't know, and that's how you get the laugh. Very close to. I'm stopped calling myself a researcher because I suck at research. Like I have to show citations and look at from three. I just investigate occasionally, a PhD in YouTube, but then also I've got an element of the whole tuning in and what resonates, and you can see through just actions of people as well. Like in the last 10, 15, the one that I love that makes me giggle is I trust in Hillary Clinton. Really? Did you hear the story of when she landed in Bosnia and had to run from the plane under sniper fire? No, because they showed the footage and it's a 6-year-old with a bunch of flowers walking up to him. It's like and what you're saying is as well with the impeachment thing. Before all this all happened, you can see the corruption and manipulation of the media and the way it's like. That's why they're cracking down on YouTubers with big followings, because they're getting more numbers than the mainstream media, because no one trusts them anymore because it's so blatant. Andrew Bartz has said that whatever in part of the transition, what we'll see before the revolution or however you want to call it, that the media is going to turn into the Three Stooges. And I added to that, it's more of a Monty Python sketch and Three Stooges. And if you look at that, of how the media is, that it is total clown world, where just the stupidest things. Apparently, there's a couple in the United Kingdom that both transitioned from one sex to the other, and they've had a child. And it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, my transgender
I've heard stories
woman,
like that.
yeah, transgender man is having a baby with a transgender woman. It's like, okay, it's still like if you both die in a house fire, they go by your skeleton, and it's still one or the other. But it's.
Do you remember the Star, the National Enquirer, TMZ?
Yeah, no, yeah, National Enquirer, yeah.
All these tabloids. That's basically what the news has become. Tabloids.
Yeah. It's clickbait and non-controversy. Where like there's a guy, I don't know which state it is, but it's in the United States. He didn't want to make a gay cake, a wedding cake for a gay couple.
I just read that earlier today.
Yeah, and now apparently it's bisexual cake, and it's like someone put on Twitter, go somewhere else. Stop going. You know, this is the second time. You know he's not going to make the frigging cake. It's not the only bakery in the town, I'm sure. But it's like, that's the ridiculousness of it. It's like, you know, if you refuse someone, all of a sudden, I'm offended and you don't like me because I'm blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, I'm closed. Like, go away.
Well, this guy, apparently he was sued a couple years ago. He's being sued again now.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
That's what I'm talking. Like, real. That's targeting. Just the guy. Like, that's part.
Well, that stuff's not working with people anymore, though. Back then, it was working with people. All the distractions. Yeah. Who's going to go to the bathroom where? You know, I was thinking to myself, you know, Americans are so full of crap that the only thing that they have to worry about is where are they going to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, this is why I won't join the military, because apparently, once you've dug 2 latrines, you have to do the other 57 genders, and that's harsh.
You know, they called that hate speech on Facebook. They gave me a warning for that joke, and they said this is hate speech, and I'm like, I'm American, I can joke about that, and it's true.
Yes, and well, that's the thing. Is Facebook a publisher or a platform? I can't remember that. One is you take responsibility of what you put out, or
a publisher takes responsibility.
Yeah. Or
a platformer doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they keep bouncing from one to the other, and you know, bringing up Andrew again, because someone said, well, how can we sort of protest and not, you know, pitchforks and torches and all that type of thing? We'll probably have a digital revolution where everyone organizes to deactivate their account for 2 days on Facebook, and if everyone does it, the platformers will freak out because it's like they're not getting any revenue, and it's one way where we won't get shot at, but we can, you know, imagine if everyone left YouTube or Twitter, or most people are leaving Twitter, but Facebook, that monopoly over things, as well as like, wow, they're all connecting. So the people behind the curtain aspect would start to freak out. It's like, well, they're all working together again, which would freak out the virus, because instead of just, you know, divide and conquer, and it's like, oh, we got this. Oh, do you think that the Team Dark, Black Hat's virus is cornered and is freaking out because we're near the end?
I think that the 4-year clock that we saw in Egypt, I think that there's a lot more validity to it than we first paid attention, because here we are at the halfway point, and they're already losing. But they're trying to bring out as much as possible at this point. But like you said earlier, they keep dropping the ball. I think as we move more towards this 4-year clock, we're going to see them dropping the ball more and more and more and more and more until they finally go away.
Yeah. Interesting enough, I just had a thought of a loop inside of a loop. It's 7 years since the end of the Mayan calendar, and I think they have 13 years, so it's halfway through it's called the Night of the Jaguar as well. And so that's three midpoints. Oh, well, two midpoints. And so, yeah, there seems to be that upswing, because if you're feeling, it's very hard to explain to other people that don't walk in our energies, because they don't see it. But if you go by feelings, like, no, we're fine. Now, obviously, you still have to be aware and do things and that type of thing. But I can't really see forward. I'm being pushed into the now. I'm just staying more in the now and taking it day by day, because it's getting to the point that things change in 24 hours. It's probably going to get down to 12 hours. Do you observe the Schumann resonance at all?
I saw today it was just completely on fire. And I woke up this morning and I posted, hey, I got great news for everybody. And what did I say? I said, this is the most important day in history. It's the beginning of the rest of your life. It was just supposed to be a motivational post. Somebody jumps in and says, have you seen the Schumann resonance? I'm like, no, I didn't. Oh, wow, that's what I was feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, because it looks like a waterfall. Because I go through, and it's not converting non-believers, but since I've been talking about at least all year, that you can, in a way, like astrology, the planets can predict your future. Well, even if you don't believe that, you can look backwards and so, like, the last time that Pluto was in Capricorn, when all these revolutions happening, and here we are now, you can use it as a time marker and sort of calculate the data of, like, well, this happened, when this, and this. With the Schumann resonance, same thing is, like, when people, why do I feel edgy and I'm full of things, blah, 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 and you look at Schumann resonance, oh, it's 46. Fair enough. And that's not converting people, but allowing them to see, because you can prove it on a scientific level, that the electromagnetic field of the planet is changing. Then you go into the woo-woo, where it's saying it's now is a good question for you. Are we transmuting the simulation and leaving it by leaving all the dense virus crap behind as we expand into the high frequency and probably wake up in a pod somewhere in Atlantis?
I think the Matrix is shutting down, or at the very least resetting, and it's returning to a point of balance. And I think at that point of balance, then the doors will open for us. Like, the doors can't open as long as it's not balanced, but it's moving back towards that time. Is it going to continue after that and continue in a renewed state? Possibly, or maybe shut down completely. Yeah. But I feel that our time here is limited, and not in a negative way whatsoever. It's just the game's almost over. And if this is a game, then we've done a pretty awesome job, in my opinion, of especially here towards the end, as a humanity. We've woken up, we've ascended, we've raised our frequency, and we're seeing through the illusions, and we've expelled the virus. Maybe that's what the game was all about. Maybe the virus was maybe I was wrong about the fact that the virus isn't supposed to be here. Maybe that is the reason why it's supposed to be here, so we can overcome it.
Yeah, heard it said different ways, and totally agree. The experience that we're having, you need the shadow to show the light. The cabal playing their parts so we can learn all this suffering. The virus was here, even though it probably was infected or put in for someone to have a control. But if you go further up, as George would say, you go further up from the cosmic drama, where it's the prime creator, how far up it is. It's like, no, I'll allow that so it can have this, because if you know everything, it's boring. And I can see, if you look from the prime creator's point of view, this is awesome, having all the experience and everything else like that. As a human in the 3D world, I'm friggin' tired. Like, okay. I was going to go somewhere. I can't remember.
You provoked a thought within me. When we came back from Egypt and broken through into the 13th dimension, there was a point of reintegration again. And it was like the biggest reintegration I ever had to go through, because breaking through all the illusion all of a sudden made the game unplayable, because it just, like, when you know everything, there's nowhere else to go. And so I had to start to believe that the illusion was real again, just to be able to operate within the 3D. And we're so eager to get to the end of it, and we're so eager to find the absolute truth, but once we get there, we're like, oh crap, now there's nothing else to play. It's like when you're a child, when you're a child, everything is new, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh wow, my first tricycle, my first kiss, my first this, my first that, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. It's that innocence. And so I would tell people the most important thing is the journey, because
Yeah.
once you get there, the journey's over. But enjoy every moment that we have right now.
Yeah.
Enjoy every day, and enjoy. One of the things that I feel like the New Age religion, all of that stuff, tries to take away from us is the enjoyment of this matrix.
Mm.
The enjoyment of meat, the enjoyment of sex, the enjoyment of sugar every once in a while. Everything I think has to be done in moderation, of course, but we should enjoy some of the pleasures and sights and sounds and sensations that this matrix has to offer. That's one of the reasons it was created, so we can experience all of these things, but we
Yeah.
have to experience them through a balanced way, a balanced perspective. So
Yeah, and going back to the balance idea is, once the program is in balance, then on the holodeck we can find the door and leave the holodeck.
yeah, exactly.
And so
Yeah.
well, let's start wrapping up because it's been 2 hours and 20 minutes. It just felt like a natural point of like, and rest.
I agree.
Would you would you like to share anything else with the listener / audience or customers? And
Um, I think that I just basically said that enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. Um, Kiss the one you love right now, because you never know when the last time it's going to be.
Yep.
I end every single show with that because we really
Yes, you
don't
do.
know.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how everything is just unfolded, and here we are, and we're still here. And as long as we're walking our path, as long as we're staying in the higher frequency, we have no reason to fear anything, because we're going to
Yeah.
move through this game perfectly. It's when we start to veer off of that higher path, when we start to operate from the lower frequencies, that we're susceptible to everything. So there should be no reason for anybody to have any fear about anything that's happening.
Mm.
Well, not just right now, but anything that's happening in your life. And that's the number one fundamental thing, is overcoming that fear, and leaving that emotion behind. Then you can enjoy the rest of this game, in my opinion.
Well, that is true. I've noticed that in the last week or two, the realization of finding the right way of existing in this reality is enjoyment, where instead of trying to control everything, allowing the universe, like I sort of explain it, we live in a placebo universe and everything's a reflection. And so if you want to manifest something, you put the thought out for the highest outcome, and then let everything work. Instead of going, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. Like the universe is like, well, one request at a time. And so that's the joy of part of the game, is to watch it unfold. And if you want to turn left, but your heart's saying turn right, turn right. It may take a bit longer, and you may meet your future wife or have a gold bar thrown at you. But if you turn left, you'll be at work quicker, and nothing will happen for 30 years. That divergent point where allow the heart to I do make a bit of a joke where we're amalgamating the heart with the mind, because the mind here is a translator for the 3D. And let's see, you're being called away by your cat. But the heart
She always has to make an appearance. She's
oh yes,
a show stealer.
the heart is the true essence, basically. And when people say, but the brain's whatever, it's actually you're upgrading, because if you don't turn your brain off, because the first thing your heart's going to say is breathe, you idiot. It's I do find it fascinating, and I'm slowly getting the negativity, or the lower vibrations and the fears and the doubt are falling away. Even those those life lesson echoes. I learned this 2004. Why is it back here now? Type of like, okay, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. There you go.
Sometimes
yeah.
we have to go through our lessons again, because
Yeah.
now we have a higher perspective, and we can go through those same
Yeah.
lessons and learn so much more as a
Yeah.
result. I think a lot of people, they and including myself, we fall into these like mundane things we have to do. We have to get up, we have to go to work, we have to work in these menial jobs. Sometimes we feel like we're not really doing anything, but it's all part of the game. And I was working for this corporation. It was horrible. I hated the corporate world and all of that. But I realized there was an end. There was a means. It was a means to an end. And the means to the end was that I was able to create a situation for myself based on the resources that I was gaining from there to expand my consciousness. I was able to get the tools to do the ayahuasca. I was able to take the energy that I was accumulating there and put it into the spirituality and the ascension and the growth. And so when we go through these experiences, whatever we're doing in this matrix, even if it seems daunting, if it's for that end of spiritual awakening, spiritual enlightenment, sometimes we just have to go through them. And when we go through them, and with that mindset, then all of a sudden everything starts to make sense and everything starts to come to a point of balance. So we used to get people saying, I hate my job, I hate this, I hate that, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, what are you doing with your job? Oh, I'm just surviving. Okay, well, how are you applying what you're doing now to your spiritual growth? Well, it does give me an opportunity on the weekends to go over here and do this and that, et cetera, that helps me with my spirituality. Okay, now that you've recognized that, now you understand this here is connected to that. So I don't know. I've been doing shows for 5.5 hours now because I did a show before. I hope I explained that right.
No,
But
that's perfect. That I was.
is it
That's,
okay? Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Because
We
that's
have
the
to.
one word.
I guess this is a better way to explain it. We have to be able to operate in 3D while at the same time operating in the higher frequency. When we find that balance of operating in 3D and the higher frequency, that, in my opinion, is when we found the balance of how to operate within this matrix.
Well, the one word that's been through my mind all this year is balance, and I think that's what we're seeing. Is because shadow work and the negativity. It's nice not to have any, but it's there for a reason. And once you work with, like, fear, is there to show you a positive if you can see it. And your dark side is actually a friend once you figure out how to connect with it and you don't let it control you. I think that's part of, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I guess this is another thing. I'm going to do the next video I'm going to do is about this particular topic here. And it's not a thought that I came up with, but it's one that I'm expanding upon. One of my good friends, I mentioned him earlier, Nick Bravo, again, or maybe that was on the previous show. He said something really profound. He said, our dark side protects the light. And if the two are in balance, then we can protect our own light with our dark side. And that's the balance that we're seeking. And I thought that is absolutely brilliant because you're right. If you don't have the balance of light and dark, the light is completely exposed and then the dark will come in and just feed upon that light. And so keeping the two in balance is exactly where we need to be.
Yes. And I think that's a perfect way of ending the show. Thank you for coming on for number 8, extended edition, because I just knew that, not waffle, but I knew we would have a great conversation. So just quickly, please share your YouTube channel. And do you have a website or just the YouTube? How can people find you?
All right. YouTube.com/Beyond the Veil. We also own a radio station, tfrlive.com. We have 33 different hosts there. They're all badasses, and it's a big mixed bag of all kinds of stuff from conspiracy to higher consciousness to flat earth type of stuff. We don't micromanage the host or anything like that, and they're free as long as they're speaking from their heart. That's the only rule, that you have to speak from your heart on TFR. So tfrlive.com. We haven't been doing our show too frequently there because I've given all the good time slots to all our hosts. So yeah.
So far.
Yeah, and then we also have a CBD oil that we developed a couple of years ago. It's called Aya Life, ayalife.com, and it's a combination of the ayahuasca vine and the CBD. It's non-psychoactive, and we have had the most amazing testimonials. One off the top of my head is Dr. Chris Bogner, who's one of our listeners. He's an OBGYN. He said as soon as he started taking it, he felt this tingling in his spine. His pain started going away, and he felt his pineal gland activated. And I was like,
Oh,
are you
nice.
serious? That's pretty incredible. We've had other testimonials, mostly about pain. Sheree has a chronic pain condition, and that was the reason why we developed it, because I was looking for a way to help her first and foremost.
Yeah.
But I went through this whole thing with anxiety last year, and I've been through it all. I've drank ayahuasca in the pyramid. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've bungee jumped, and I was
Mm.
getting these like it was this headache, and it was like this twitching right here,
Yep.
and it felt like I was having a heart attack. And I
Mm.
was like, I'm on the verge of a stroke. I know I'm on the verge of a stroke. I dropped a significant amount of weight, and it's like always happens. Like as soon as you start getting really healthy, you have a heart attack. Like I hear these
Yeah.
stories like all the time,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
know this is about to happen. And I went to the doctor, and I'm like, I have all this. I have this tinnitus. I have all these weird things going on. And I finally convinced one to do a brain scan on me, because I was like, there's got to be a stroke coming on or something. And the
Yeah.
doctor came back and said, you're having panic attacks. And I'm like, I don't panic. Okay. I do not panic.
Yeah.
But as soon as I recognized I had the panic attacks, I started taking the Eye of Life. I upped the dose, and it really, really helped with the anxiety. So if people are experiencing anything like that, please check out ayalife.com, ayalife.com. And here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do, just for your listeners, a buy one get one free special. Go in there and put 2 bottles in your cart, and use coupon code 8, since this is number 8.
Yep.
Just type in 8, actually like spell it out all lowercase,
Yep.
and it'll give you one of the bottles for free. So
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Score. See, that makes people see. This is the reason why you watch all the video. Just putting out to YouTube. So, if you enjoy, I know I enjoyed, but I don't have to subscribe to my own channel. I think I can. I don't understand how that works. But if you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, share, leave a nice comment. Thank you for watching. If you're on Anchor FM, Spotify, and so forth, it's Wafer Thin Entertainment. I love that name. And I'll be back next week with someone as exciting as well. Or we'll just continue talking, because it is an infinity. So thank you, Chris, for being here. It's been awesome. And
It is my pleasure, brother. I'm so glad that we were able to connect, because it's like, we jumped in the conversation, and the majority of the conversation, I just felt like it was like 2 friends just talking.
yeah,
And those are the best interviews, in my opinion. So I really appreciate that.
thank you very much. We will see you soon.